Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nha Starin. Nha Starin was born on May 23, 1989. Little is known about her childhood, except that she had an older brother by the age of 34. She was living in a small apartment and struggling financially. She also dealt with mental health issues. Nha worked hard to overcome these challenges to create a safe and comfortable environment for her children. But it was a difficult journey. Her relatives had to help care for her children. Her life continued without major changes until something unexpected happened. On May 1, 2023, the St. Paul police received a disturbing call from Nha's father. He had last spoken to her on April 23, and she seemed very scared. He believed that she was afraid of her boyfriend. The police began searching for her, but did not find her in her apartment. A man who claimed to be the father of one of Nha's children also reported that he had not heard from her for a long time. It was unusual for her to go silent for so long, as she was in regular contact with him because they had a child together, according to him. Their last conversation had been on April 21, 2023. The police also spoke with a neighbor of Nha's who had disturbing information. One day, she noticed a bruise under Nha's eye and a red mark on her neck. When the neighbor asked if she had been attacked, Nha confirmed that she had. The neighbor suggested calling the police, but Nha begged her not to, fearing it would make things worse. This allegation of assault further complicated the investigation and added to the complexity of Nha's situation. A number of important pieces of information were uncovered, revealing that Nha had a boyfriend named Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, who frequently visited her apartment, although his last name was not listed on the lease. The manager provided the police with his phone number. It was confirmed that the phone number belonged to Joseph, a man in his 40s. The manager identified him in a photo, confirming that he was the one who had visited Nha. This discovery was a major development in the case. The police obtained recordings from surveillance cameras located near the apartment, which provided crucial evidence. At 6 p.m. on April 23, the cameras recorded Nha, clearly upset. Hurriedly leaving her apartment, she was quickly tackled by Joseph, who pulled her inside. This is the last recorded footage. Video analysis showed Joseph frequently entering and exiting the apartment between April 21 and April 28. The manager raised concerns when he mentioned that there was only one set of keys for residents, despite the footage clearly showing Joseph using his own key to open the door each time. At approximately 5 p.m. on April 28, Joseph was caught on camera leaving the apartment with a suitcase and a duffel bag. He loaded the luggage into a pickup truck and drove away quickly. Police later discovered that the truck belonged to a resident of the apartment building. Police also spoke with a friend of Nha, who had valuable information about her lifestyle and her relationship with Joseph. The friend explained that although Nha struggled with drug addiction, she always kept in touch with her family and never went more than a day without contacting them. Therefore, her absence for several days raised alarms. The friend also recounted a phone conversation with Joseph after Nha went missing. Joseph claimed that Nha went to the store but did not return, according to the family friend. Joseph expressed concern that a man named Kyle might pose a threat to Nha. After Nha went missing, Joseph took no action. He did not report her absence to the police and continued with his daily life. He was the last person to be in the apartment before she went missing. Concerned and with mounting evidence, police entered Nha's apartment with the building manager and quickly discovered alarming signs. The bedroom window was broken. In the living room, they found a television with a severely cracked screen, which the manager confirmed had never been damaged before. As they continued their search, police found broken glass on the microwave, with shards scattered throughout the bedroom. The mattress had a large hole in it, and there were red marks on the bed, which raised suspicions. The anxiety surrounding Nha's disappearance grew, revealing a troubling array of evidence. On May 25, after completing the necessary legal procedures, officers obtained a search warrant and processed Manijay's apartment for vital evidence. Experts discovered a disturbing scene. There was a large amount of blood in the living room and kitchen, especially on the sofa and floor. Police confirmed that efforts had been made to clean up the scene. It was clear that someone had been seriously injured or possibly dead in the apartment. Preliminary analysis confirmed that blood samples taken from the scene belonged to Manijay. As officers continued their investigation, they uncovered important information about her finances. They discovered that she had received government assistance in Minnesota through electronic benefit transfers, which allow recipients to make purchases directly at retail stores. Police quickly realized the significance of this discovery and obtained a warrant to access Manijay's account records. They found a series of transactions made after her disappearance. One notable transaction occurred on May 9, 2023, when Joseph used Manijay's card to withdraw cash from a highway ATM that same day. He made a purchase at a store, buying items such as a cleaning bucket, 2 boxes of paper towels, trash bags, liquid detergent, gloves, and disinfectant wipes. The strange combination of items aroused the police's suspicions. On May 11, Joseph used Manijay's card again, this time at a grocery store. He also went to a hardware store, where he purchased more paper towels, cleaning supplies, and disinfectant wipes. The repeated purchases of these items further raised concerns about Joseph's actions and intentions. Police obtained a warrant to access information associated with Joseph's Google account. After reviewing the data, they discovered a series of significant internet searches made by him. On May 1, he searched for how to report a missing person. On May 3, Joseph searched for methods to delete files. On May 23, he inquired about removing Jeeps from a scooter. Finally, on June 4, he read about lime for soil. It is important to note that lime is a substance that can accelerate the decomposition of a body and eliminate the associated odor. The investigation team was aware of this, raising their concerns about Joseph's potential involvement in Manijay's disappearance. With compelling evidence against him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. On June 26, a special weapons and tactics team arrived at Joseph's home, prepared for a potentially dangerous situation. When police confronted him in the apartment, he resisted and barricaded himself in his bedroom, shocking everyone present. He lit a fire to escalate the situation. The special weapons and tactics team proceeded with extreme caution, but were unable to apprehend him. He resisted aggressively and even attempted to grab one of the officers' weapons. Joseph was eventually restrained and taken to a local hospital for evaluation to rule out any mental health issues that might have influenced his behavior at the time of his arrest. There were 2 other people in the apartment, including an unidentified woman. She was injured, with bruises, scratches, and a red mark on her neck. The woman later reported to the police that Joseph had choked her and threatened her with violence, claiming that the neighbors would not hear her screams. The second person living in the apartment was Joseph's roommate. When the task force arrived, he hid in his bedroom, where he was discovered and arrested. He later informed the St. Paul Police Department that he had suffered a traumatic brain injury, which had resulted in a loss of smell. He also mentioned his long-standing relationship with Joseph and explained that, due to his busy Monday through Friday work schedule, he rarely interacted with Joseph or the women Joseph brought to the apartment. The roommate also noted that he had only met Manijay once or twice and emphasized that he did not have a close relationship with her. When the roommate asked Joseph about Manijay's whereabouts, Joseph told him that she had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The man also admitted that he had used Manijay's money. Joseph had given him her card and PIN, leading him to believe that he had access to the account. Police interviewed the manager of the residential complex where Joseph lived. He reported that on May 15 or 16, 2023, residents complained about a foul odor coming from Joseph's apartment. The manager noted that it resembled the stench of a dead animal. To determine the source of the odor, on May 18, the manager and a maintenance worker attempted to enter Joseph's apartment to investigate. However, Joseph acted aggressively and blocked their path. The manager then instructed Joseph and his roommate to clean the apartment and gave them a week to do so. Shortly thereafter, both the manager and maintenance staff saw Joseph carrying large black duffel bags out of the apartment. The sight shocked witnesses, who began to speculate about what might be in the bags. The forensic team from the St. Paul Police Department conducted an investigation of Joseph's apartment. During the search, they discovered more evidence. Their report noted a significant amount of blood in the bathroom and in his closet. There was a foul odor in his home that matched the odors reported by residents. They also discovered other biological material found in the home. After arresting Joseph, the police accessed Jeep's data from his phone, which pointed to a storage facility where Joseph rented a room with a refrigerator through his roommate. Realizing the importance of this clue, they obtained a search warrant for the storage facility. On June 28, the police began investigating the location. As they approached the storage facility, they immediately smelled a very unpleasant odor. The police decided to cut the lock to gain access. Once inside, they discovered containers wrapped in plastic, a blue gym bag, and a small suitcase. Notably, one of these bags was similar to the one Joseph was seen carrying out of Manijay's apartment in the surveillance footage. They also found a green bag containing cleaning products similar to those Joseph had previously purchased, sitting on top of the refrigerator. On the advice of forensic experts, the police carefully removed the containers and sports bags from the refrigerator, from which the foul odor was emanating. The contents were inaccessible until they were sent to the medical examiner for further analysis. After X-rays were taken, it was discovered that all of the containers contained human remains. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner then conducted an autopsy and determined that all of the body parts were carefully packaged, wrapped in multiple layers of paper, film, and bags. Opening these packed remains was a laborious process. Tests confirmed that the remains belonged to Nha Starin. With identification made through her tattoos and dental records, the police again reviewed surveillance footage from Manijay's home. Focusing on the bags Joseph carried, he had handling of the body Manijay's in her apartment. Sorting her remains into different bags and carrying them out, Joseph faces multiple charges, including second-degree murder and arson for setting fire to his apartment during a confrontation with the Special Weapons and Tactics team. He is also charged with threatening and disarming a police officer. On June 30, 2023, Joseph Stephen Jorgensen had an afternoon court hearing regarding the murder charge. Throughout the trial, Joseph shook his head while listening to the assistant district attorney announce that his bail was set at $5 million. The judge remained largely silent throughout the proceedings. Joseph's attorney requested a bail hearing for later. It is believed that a detailed defense strategy is currently being developed. On the same day, Joseph appeared in court. St. Paul Police Sergeant Ernster held a press conference to discuss a significant event that occurred during the ongoing investigation. Fanta Zayavong was also reported missing. She was last seen in July 2021 with Joseph. This new information prompted the police to immediately begin searching for her. During the press conference, it was announced that Fanta Zayavong's remains had been discovered in a separate storage facility in North Minneapolis, approximately 30 miles from where Manijay's body was found. Details about the second victim have not been released, but many believe that Joseph was directly involved in her murder. Manijay's family has expressed gratitude to the police for any leads in the ongoing investigation. If Joseph is convicted of second-degree murder, he could face a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. His next court appearance, originally scheduled for August 21, has been postponed for unknown reasons. Joseph Stephen Jorgensen remains in custody at the Ramsey County Jail. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Cameleri. Jessica Cameleri was the younger daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian couple of Maltese descent. Unlike her older sister Christy, Jessica was born with an intellectual disability. Jessica had an IQ of approximately 55 to 60, significantly lower than the average range of 90 to 110, which placed her in the lowest 1% and classified her as having a mild intellectual delay. Individuals with mild intellectual disabilities typically follow a different pace of development. They may start speaking, reading, writing, and doing math later than others, but can learn to communicate and express themselves in everyday situations. This delay caused her to start school later than her peers. As a result, she was vulnerable to teasing and bullying by classmates who did not understand her condition. Jessica coped with stress and anxiety by lashing out in intense anger, often targeting women. As a result, she developed intermittent explosive disorder. This mental health condition is characterized by sudden, recurring episodes of aggressive and violent behavior. Typically, intermittent explosive disorder starts in children around the age of 6 and worsens during the teenage years and early 20s. It is a mental health issue, not just a normal temper tantrum, and is linked to low levels of serotonin, a hormone in the brain that regulates emotions and mood. Jessica's behavior at school was causing problems, and she often lashed out at both students and teachers. In one incident, she physically hit a male student and refused to stop. As a result, she was suspended from school indefinitely and was forced to stay home under the care of her mother, Rita, who received a disability pension to support her. Jessica struggled with three main conditions: intellectual disability, which affected her cognitive abilities, irrational anger outbursts, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. ADHD is a chronic condition that affects the brain, making it difficult for people, especially children, to control their behavior. Jessica was diagnosed with several mental health conditions, including severe bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. Additionally, she had autism spectrum disorders, which impacted her ability to understand her own thoughts and feelings, as well as empathize with others. The effects of autism also made everyday tasks, such as shopping, using public transportation, banking, and working, particularly challenging for her. Jessica had fixations on certain things, including 3 specific numbers: 2, 3, and 5. These numbers were linked in her mind to her favorite colors: yellow for 2, green for 3, and purple for 5. As a result of her fascination with these numbers, she would often create random phone numbers to dial, attempting to speak with men. In one instance, she repeatedly called a family's home in Bangladesh over 100 times a day solely because she liked their phone number. In 2018, her fixation turned to harassment when she began targeting a meat company in Daylesford, England. Her behavior became more uncontrollable, to the point of threatening company employees, including the owner Matthew Leafield, and his family, going so far as to claim she would harm them with a chainsaw. Jessica had an unrelenting fascination with horror movies, and she couldn't shake off. She would spend an enormous amount of time rewatching violent videos, especially certain films that captured her attention. Her favorites included Saw, Jeepers Creepers, and, above all, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Released in 1974, the latter film was about young people in Texas being pursued by cannibals wielding chainsaws. The graphic violence in the movie led to it being banned in multiple countries, including Australia and the UK. When Jessica's mother, Rita, tried to stop her from watching these films, Jessica would become extremely angry. Jessica and her mother, Rita, resided in a St. Clair suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Vince, Jessica's father, divorced Rita when Jessica was a teenager due to her behavioral problems. Her frequent tantrums put a strain on her parents' marriage, eventually leading to their breakup. Jessica appears to have conflicting personality traits. She has low self-esteem and is childish and naive. However, she often feels narcissistic, believing that she deserves special treatment due to her mental health needs. This thing sometimes made her take advantage of others and prioritize her own needs above theirs. However, Rita still always takes good care of her daughter. She knew her daughter had problems, but felt it was her responsibility to take care of and protect her. After discovering her daughter's harassing phone calls, Rita took the initiative to apologize. Although Jessica loved her family dearly, she was especially close to her mother, who made every effort to meet her needs and chose to care for her at home rather than seek full-time care at a psychiatric facility. In Australia, about 1 in 5 people, or 20% of the population, experienced a mental condition between 2017 and 2018. This equates to around 4.8 million people. Women are more prone to these problems than men. Young people aged 15 to 24 years were the most affected. A mental illness is a serious, diagnosable mental health condition. It affects a person's thoughts, feelings, and behavior and can impact their relationships with others. Examples of mental illnesses include depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and psychotic disorders. These conditions significantly affect individuals' emotions and relationships, not just them but also their families and caregivers. The tragic incident on July 20, 2019 was the culmination of a series of violent acts by Jessica. Her history of assaulting and violence others has been around for many years, with incidents including attacking the mother-in-law of her sister and aunt by pulling their hair. Despite her convictions, Jessica was never imprisoned and was always allowed to remain under the care of her mother. Rita, who seemed to be the only person who could accept her actions. Jessica exhibited aggressive behavior towards women in public places, such as streets and shopping centers, often because she perceived that they were staring at her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable or ashamed. This behavior reached a boiling point when she got into a physical altercation with another patient in a doctor's office waiting room, resulting in her being banned from the office. Jessica's aggressive behavior continued in 2018 when she physically attacked a nurse during a hospital visit. As a result, she was admitted to a mental health unit for 9 days to address a severe episode of her mood disorder. During her stay, she was treated with lithium, a medication commonly used to manage bipolar disorder, in addition to antipsychotic medications. In the months leading up to the crime, Jessica stopped taking her prescribed medication and instead turned to natural to manage her health conditions. At the same time, her mother, Rita, was looking for alternative ways to help Jessica. Rita even paid $2,500 to see a psychic in Sydney's suburb who claims to be able to exorcise demons, an evil force that she believes is influencing Jessica. However, many relatives and friends were concerned that Jessica might pose a danger to those around her, but Rita remained convinced that her daughter was harmless. Jessica's older sister, Christy, described their mother, Rita, as a selfless person who always put benefit others first. This thing was especially evident in the way Rita cared for Jessica, who often rejected professional help. Rita's older sister also realized her unconditional love for Jessica and frequently expressed concerns that Jessica might harm her. However, Rita's motherly love clouded her judgment, causing her to overlook her older sister's concerns. In fact, the day before the fatal attack, Rita had to take Jessica to the police station because she had been making threatening phone calls to strangers. Yet she still chose to ignore the warning signs. On July 20, 2019, Jessica felt embarrassed when her mother scolded her in front of a stranger in a parking lot. The stranger simply walked by, unaware of the tension between them. After visiting her sister, Jessica and her mother returned home. Jessica then asked her mother to order additional food from Red Rooster, but her mother, Rita, declined. Jessica became upset and placed 3 separate calls to the restaurant at 9:18, 9:20, and 9:21 p.m. Additionally, Jessica asked her mother to call a doctor to come to their house. When the doctor arrived, he was frightened by Jessica's behavior and quickly left. He was pursued by Jessica until he managed to safely escape in his vehicle. Rita could no longer wait patiently, so she told Jessica that she had decided to call an ambulance and was to take Jessica to a mental health facility. Unfortunately, this led to Jessica's most severe episode of rage. That night, 57-year-old Rita was violently attacked by her daughter in her own kitchen. The assault began when Jessica dragged her mother by the hair into the kitchen, where had a collection of 7 meat cleavers. 4 of the 7 cleavers were broken during the attack, but Jessica continued to use the remaining ones to inflict harm. She stabbed her mother's head and neck more than 100 times, causing her mother severe mutilation. This brutal act was not solely a result of Jessica's anger, revealing a disturbing level of fascination with violence, likely fueled by her excessive daily consumption of horror movies. The forensic pathologist's autopsy revealed that Rita suffered severe injuries to her head and neck, resulting in her death from multiple stab wounds. The fatal blow was a severed spine at the second vertebra in her upper neck, essentially leaving her head partially detached. Notably, Rita had sustained over 90 defensive wounds, suggesting she was conscious and endured extreme pain and terror for a substantial portion of the attack. This horrific discovery is especially chilling since her own daughter, whom Rita had cared for and loved, was the one who inflicted the brutal violence. During the brutal attack, Jessica's 4-year-old nephew was present at the scene. He was the son of Jessica's older sister, Christy, and had been in Rita's care for a few days. The young boy witnessed Jessica attacking and beheading his grandmother. When he attempted to intervene, Jessica accidentally inflicted a minor head injury on him. The traumatic incident caused the boy to vomit, further adding to the horror of the scene. Jessica called the emergency number from her mother's cell phone after fatally her. During the call, Jessica claimed she acted in self-defense, stating that her mother, Rita, had attacked her first. This led to Jessica defending herself by stabbing Rita multiple times, eventually more than 100 times, and then beheading her. Following the incident, Jessica disposed of Rita's head in a nearby neighbor's yard. Upon arriving at the house in St. Clair, Sydney, New South Wales, police found Jessica outside. Her clothes stained with blood, holding a water bottle. What's striking, however, was Jessica's reaction to the situation. Rather than displaying remorse for her actions, Jessica expressed concern about her own future. She asked police officers and later detectives if it was possible to reattach her mother's head, seemingly holding onto the hope of a miraculous medical help that could bring Rita back to life. A police officer questioned the practicality of Jessica's plan, but she remained optimistic, believing that medical professionals could work miracles through surgery. Jessica also asked if she would face severe punishment, including the death penalty, for taking her mother's life. The officer informed her that Australia does not impose capital punishment, which brought her a sense of relief. Jessica then confessed to the police that her idea to decapitate her mother had originated from the horror movies she frequently watched. A disturbing conversation was captured on a police officer's body camera when they arrived at the scene at 11:43 p.m. on July 20, 2019. Upon arrival, first responders were met with a scene they described as one of the most horrific they had ever seen. The following day, July 21, 2019, Jessica appeared in court and chose not to request bail. According to a friend, this decision was not unexpected, as Jessica likely lacked understanding of the bail process. Jessica Cameleri was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020 after a trial that focused on her long-standing mental health issues. Initially, she had pleaded not guilty to murder, citing her mental health reasons as a reason. In early 2021, she received a prison sentence of up to 21 years and 7 months, with a non-parole period of 16 years and 2 months. This means she will be eligible for parole on September 19, 2035. Christy expresses her grief and shock, revealing that her younger sister Jessica was responsible for their mother's tragic death. While hesitant to forgive Jessica, but Christie expressed hope that Jessica would receive the necessary support and care in prison. This thing helped Rita could finally rest in peace knowing that her daughter's needs were being met, something that had failed to happen during her lifetime. The judge in the case offered counseling to the jurors, acknowledging that the harrowing evidence they had heard would likely haunt them. The judge said that during jury selection, several individuals had refused to participate in the trial. She also stated that Rita's murder was one of the most serious murders the court had ever seen. She described it as a particularly heinous crime and horrifying because it occurred in the victim's own home. During the trial, Jessica's lawyer revealed that she had expressed remorse for her actions in a letter to her family. In the letter, Jessica acknowledged that Rita had not provoked her and took responsibility for her mother's death. Jessica was evaluated by a psychiatrist who noted that she often lacked facial expressions when communicating with others. Although Jessica showed limited emotions, she did not exhibit signs of schizophrenia or hallucinations. The psychiatrist's conclusion was that Jessica required long-term, comprehensive mental health support to manage her risk factors and address her underlying issues. Jessica was incarcerated in the strictest unit of the women's section at the correctional complex. Throughout her time in prison, she continued to engage in problematic behavior. An incident standout involved a dispute over food exchange on September 9, 2019, and she responded by throwing a teacup at another inmate. Although she was charged with assault in court the following day, she did not receive any additional punishment. There were several other notable incidents involving her during her imprisonment. She got into a fight with another inmate on October 14, 2019, and was punished with 5 days in solitary confinement. Additionally, she disobeyed an order on November 3, 2019, and damaged property on July 31, 2020, resulting in a fine of $200. Another assault incident occurred on November 21, 2020, for which she received 7 days in solitary confinement. In January 2021, she was convicted of common assault once more, but did not face any additional consequences. Jessica has defended her actions, explaining that no matter what she does or where she goes, other inmates will continue to cause her misery. She also pointed out that life behind bars is challenging and vastly different from life on the outside. One major issue in prisons is the high prevalence of mental health issues. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, in 2018, nearly half of Australian prisoners had been diagnosed with a mental health condition. Although there is no direct correlation between having a mental health condition and committing a crime, these statistics suggest that many prisoners in Australia struggled with mental health issues before their incarceration. Research has found a link between mental illnesses and the likelihood of committing crimes, especially among individuals with psychotic disorders. Symptoms of bipolar disorder can directly contribute to criminal acts, while extreme anxiety or stress can increase the risk of violent behavior due to heightened emotions and impulsivity. On the other hand, being in a prison environment can worsen existing mental health conditions. The harsh realities of prison life, including the potential for violence from inmates or staff, can trigger or worsen mental health issues. Prisons are considered especially inhospitable environments for individuals struggling with mental illness, as reported by the Australian Policy Development Centre. A significant decision was made in the Sydney Supreme Court on May 15, 2023, in the case of Jessica. The court, consisting of Justices Peter Hamill, Christine Adamson, and Richard Kavanagh, decided that Jessica's case should be retried due to exceptional circumstances. A significant factor in this decision was Jessica's unusual behavior following the crime. After beheading her mother, Jessica carried the head into the street and asked emergency services personnel if they could reattach it. This action showed that Jessica's understanding of reality was severely impaired. Several mental health experts, including psychiatrists and a psychologist, testified about Jessica's mental health. Their findings indicated that due to her intellectual disability and autism, she had difficulty distinguishing between right and wrong. As a result, Justice Hamill decided to re-sentence Jessica Cameleri to 16 years in prison, with the chance of parole in 12 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of William Lewis Ree. William Lewis Ree was born in Oklahoma on July 1, 1959, the youngest of 13 children in his family. He grew up in Yukon and Anadarko. Due to his family's financial struggles, he had to drop out of school in the 9th grade to work as a farm laborer. He married Judy Flaming in 1979 after she became pregnant. After getting married, William joined the Oklahoma National Guard but eventually left. During this time, his marriage began to unravel, and Judy divorced him after just 1 year. However, William convinced Judy to remarry him, and they had another child together. Unfortunately, their marriage problems persisted, and heavy drinking led to physical abuse against Judy, ultimately causing their marriage to end again. Judy filed a complaint against her husband in 1982 after he physically abused her, claiming that he also threatened her life with a knife and a shotgun. As a result, Judy divorced him for the second time. William later remarried to another woman. However, this marriage was also short-lived, as his second wife divorced him just a few months later. And William's string of crimes resumed shortly after. In April 1986, William kidnapped a 19-year-old woman who was the daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy. The woman's car broke down on her way to the gym. And William, who worked as a truck driver at that time, approached her and offered assistance by promising to take her to the nearest payphone in his truck. Once inside the vehicle, he restrained her and committed a sexual assault. He then drove her to a nearby motel where he reserved a room for the night. When Williams gave her permission to use the bathroom, she took advantage of the chance to break free and phone the police. He then was arrested, charged, and then released after posting bail. However, a month later, while still awaiting trial, he committed another sexual assault, resulting in a second arrest. Williams stood trial for both crimes, was found guilty, and received the 25 years prison sentence. However, upon reviewing his case, an appeals court found that there were procedural errors in the original trial. As a result, his sentence was significantly shortened and ultimately led to his parole in October 1996. William moved into his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma, after serving 9.5 years. He regained his driver's license in early 1997 and then relocated to Houston, Texas. Shortly after, on May 16, 1997, he attempted to abduct and sexually assault Sandra Sapah, a 19-year-old. When Sandra stopped at a gas station in Webster, Texas, to use a payphone. After the call, she returned to her car and began driving but soon had a flat tire, forcing her to stop again. As she stood there, unsure of what to do next, William stopped the car behind her and offered to help. Sandra accepted his offer and got into the truck. However, William's intentions were sinister, and he overpowered her. Binding her wrists, then he continuing to drive on Interstate 45. Panicking, Sandra discovered that the door was unlocked. Despite being pregnant and fear for her life, Sandra made an attempt to escape by breaking free from the restraints and jumping out. Unfortunately, William caught hold of her and dragged her several miles along the pavement, causing severe injuries. Eventually, Sandra managed to break free and was taken to a nearby hospital. The police were notified, and she provided a description of her attacker. However, due to her traumatic state, she was unable to recall crucial details about the incident. To catch the predator, detectives needed more information. Months after the attack, they decided to use hypnosis on Sandra to see if she could remember anything else. Under hypnosis, Sandra recalled crucial details, including the license plate number of the truck that was involved in the crime. The detectives discovered a lead when they tracked down the owner of the vehicle with the matching license plate number. Which William? William was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to 60 years in prison in 1998. While he was serving his sentence, detectives began to suspect that he might be linked to other crimes. Unraveling these secrets took years, leaving several families without answers. On a rainy April 3, 1997, 12-year-old Laura Smither asked her mother for permission to go jogging by herself at 9 a.m. Her mother agreed, not knowing that this ordinary decision would change her life forever. Laura Smither is the daughter of Bob and Gay Smither. She grew up in Friendswood, along with her younger brother. From an early age, Laura demonstrated a kind and gentle nature. She excelled academically and showed great talent in ballet. After being accepted into the prestigious Houston Ballet Academy, her goal of becoming a professional ballerina became a reality just days before this tragic incident. Laura's mother was surprised when she asked to go jogging that day, as she rarely ventured out alone. Homeschooled by her parents, Laura didn't even attend school. However, her desire to improve her dance skills had recently inspired her to take up cardio exercises, such as jogging. She had planned to go for a short run while making breakfast, and her mother agreed, she unaware of the danger lurking nearby. When Laura failed to return after a few hours, her parents began to worry. Normally, Laura was under close supervision and never went out alone for long. Her father, Bob Smither, searched the neighborhood but found no sign of her. He figured his daughter wouldn't be out for long, but she later didn't come back. Laura's parents reached out to relatives and friends to see if anyone had any information about her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. And they contacted the police to file a missing persons report. According to Bob, Laura went jogging this morning and it took longer than he expected. As police began their investigation, locals joined Laura's family to assist in the search. With photos of Laura in hand, her family and neighbors went door to door, asking if anyone had any information. The next morning, the police resumed their search, on foot combing through the nearby woods and helicopters scouring the area from above. Despite the initial lack of leads, the community's determination never wavered. Hundreds of volunteers joined the cause, and the eventually swelling to 6,000 volunteers for a week. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies worked diligently to locate Laura. The National Coast Guard and the FBI also joined forces with the local police department to aid in the extensive search operation. Initial theories suggested that Laura may have become lost in the woods, but after that, the investigation went in one direction, now focus on the possibility of criminal behavior. On Sunday, April 20, 1997, a gathering at Friendswood High School was taking place to discuss the next steps in finding Laura. During this meeting, the police chief's expression became anxious after receiving the phone call, leaving those present there wondering what made him react like that. That evening at 10 p.m., Laura's parents received devastating news. A man walking his dog near a retention pond in Pasadena, about 12 miles from where Laura went missing, stumbled upon a badly decomposing body of a young girl. The girl was wearing only a pair of socks and was found in a muddy area. The police immediately suspected that the body was Laura's, and this was later confirmed through an autopsy. Everyone was devastated by the sudden and tragic loss of Laura. In addition to their grief, fear gripped the neighborhood, with many worried that a predator was on the loose and could target another child. To address these concerns and prevent further harm, the police opened an investigation, but initially they had no information about the perpetrator. To gather more information, the police started interviewing sex offenders in the area. They began to focus on William Reese, a 38-year-old equipment operator, was working at Windsor Estate in Friendswood at the time. On the day of Laura's disappearance, William leave the workplace around the time she went missing and returned 30 minutes later, it raising suspicions about his activities during that short period. Police conducted an in-depth investigation but were unable to find any evidence shows that William is involved in this crime. As a result, the case went unsolved for years, leaving many questions unanswered. 19 years later, another mysterious disappearance happened to Kelly Cox, 20 years old. Kelly, a criminology student at the University of North Texas. In Denton on July 15, 1997, she and her classmates took a field trip to a local prison in Denton for a criminology class. She left her car in the parking lot across from the police station and had hidden a spare key in a magnetic box underneath her car. She then locked her belongings, including her cell phone, inside the car as instructed by her professor. After completing the jail tour at noon, Kelly rushed to her car to go to the university to take a test. However, when she tried to use the spare key to open her car door, it did not work, despite she checking it the night before. Since Kelly's phone was locked in her car, so she went to a nearby gas station and used a payphone to call her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris III, for help. She then purchased a drink inside the gas station. But from that point on, Kelly was never seen alive again. After about 45 minutes, Lawrence arrived at the meeting place, but when he got there, her car was still in the parking lot, yet Kelly herself was nowhere to be found. Neither the key box nor the key were present at the scene. He spent some time searching for Kelly, and when he couldn't find her, he decided to call her mother to see if she had returned home safely. However, Kelly's mother informed him that she hadn't arrived. Despite the initial suspicion surrounding Kelly's disappearance, but her family chose to wait a little longer to see if she would come back. It wasn't until 5:30 p.m. that same day when Kelly failed to pick up her 19-month-old daughter, Alexis, from her babysitter, that her family became certain that something was amiss. Kelly's family knew that she was a responsible mother, and it was entirely out of character for her to neglect her daughter like that. When Kelly was reported missing, the police immediately started searching for her. In keeping with standard procedure in missing persons cases, the police started by scrutinizing people close to Kelly. Initially, they focused on Kelly's boyfriend Lawrence, but after he passed 4 polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. The case made progress when information led them to another potential suspect, William Reese, who had been under investigation in the Laura Smithers case. William, a sex offender, was considered a top suspect in Kelly's disappearance because a gas station receipt placed him in the Denton area on the same day Kelly vanished, even though he didn't live there at the time. The police searched his car for Kelly's fingerprints but did not find any. Without any leads, witnesses, or surveillance footage, the case stalled and went unsolved for many years. Kelly's disappearance was extremely difficult for her mother and stepfather, who had to raise Alexis on their own. As the years went by, Kelly never returned, but her daughter followed in her mother's footsteps, attending the same university. Alexis held on to the hope that her mother would come back one day. Kelly's family never lost hope of her return, continued to share her story, and kept her picture visible. Unfortunately, their wish never came true, and Kelly never made it back home. On the morning of August 17, 1997, Jessica Cameleri, a 17-year-old high school student, failed to return home after attending a theater party the night before. Jessica was born on August 28, 1979. She is known for her vibrant personality, creativity, and passion for sports. While studying at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas, she did well academically and served as captain of the school's coaching team. After focusing on her drama career and participating in numerous plays, Jessica attended a musical review in Dickinson on August 16, 1997. Following the event, she joined her friends at a cast party at Bennigan's on Bay Avenue Boulevard. However, Jessica did not return home that night, worrying her mother, who woke her father and called her. They reached out to several friends who had attended the party with Jessica, and all of them reported that she had left around 1:30 a.m. Jessica's parents immediately sensed that something was wrong and began searching for her. Upon investigating, Jessica's father found her vehicle parked near the Lamar exit, close to the freeway, with her valuables still intact. He later quickly reported his to the police. As police began their investigation, hundreds of volunteers joined in the search for Jessica. During this challenging time, Jessica's parents met Bob and Gay Smither, a couple who had also lost their daughter, Laura Smither. Jessica's family and the Smithers family are going through their own grief. The Smithers family has tried to support Jessica's parents in their search for her. Despite the best efforts of police and volunteers, no sign of Jessica has been found. As a result, police are beginning to consider foul play and believe the chances of Jessica being found alive are extremely low. The case eventually went cold, but Jessica's family never gave up searching for their daughter. In a separate incident, on July 26, 1997, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnson's car was found abandoned at a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. But she disappeared without a trace. Tiffany was born on April 6, 1978, to Michael and Kathy Dober. She was the youngest daughter, extremely close to her family, especially her mother. Tiffany was a lively and optimistic young woman who grew up in a small town, with a passion for plants and gardening that she inherited from her grandfather. After graduating from high school in 1996, she married Ryan Johnson in 1997 and moved to Bethany, Oklahoma, where she took on 2 jobs to save money for college. Her dream was to attend Oklahoma State University to pursue a degree in botany. But unfortunately, that goal was never realized. On July 26, 1997, Tiffany finished her part-time shift at a restaurant around 2 p.m. She later headed home to get ready for a night out with her husband, Ryan, to celebrate their 3-month anniversary. Tiffany was supposed to meet Ryan at 11 p.m., but before that, she stopped at the Sunshine Car Wash to wash her white neon Dodge. Tragically, she was never seen again. When Ryan went looking for her that night, he couldn't find her at home and found no signs of her whereabouts. A police officer from the Bethany Police Department discovered Tiffany's abandoned white Dodge Neon at a car wash around midnight. The car's key was still in the ignition, and the door was open. The officer found Tiffany's purse inside the vehicle and a phone number for her mother, Kathy, in the glove box. However, when contacted, Kathy had no information about her daughter's whereabouts. The investigators then reached out to Tiffany's husband, Ryan, who also claimed to be unaware of his wife's location. This raised concerns, and it became apparent that something was amiss. The next day, July 27, 1997, near I-40 and Gregory Road, searchers found the body of a young Caucasian woman. When the police arrived at the scene, they suspected the body might be Tiffany's. The suspicion was confirmed when her husband Ryan identified the body from the pictures. Tiffany's body was found with only a swimsuit on, as all other clothing had been removed. The autopsy results revealed that Tiffany was sexually assaulted and strangled to death, although the exact time of her death could not be confirmed. Authorities collected unknown DNA from her body as evidence. With no leads on a suspect, investigators initially focused on Ryan, Tiffany's husband. However, they soon discovered that Tiffany was last seen at the car wash at 6 p.m., and Ryan had a solid alibi, having been at work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. A new lead emerged when the car wash owner contacted investigators, reporting that he saw a customer on the same day Tiffany disappeared. The customer was a man named William Reese, who had been featured in a news report a few months earlier for his involvement in an abduction in Texas. What's more noteworthy is that William has a personal relationship with Tiffany. His mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother, although he himself had never met Tiffany. After her death, He even called Tiffany's mother to offer his condolences. Despite this new information, police were still unable to gather enough evidence to prove William's involvement in Tiffany's murder, and the case remained unsolved for a long time. In 2015, thanks to advancements in DNA technology, investigators found new evidence in the Tiffany case. A DNA swab taken during Tiffany's autopsy in 1997 was sent to the lab for testing. The results matched a DNA profile in the Cody's database, which implicated William in Tiffany's murder. He was subsequently charged in Oklahoma City with the 1997 kidnapping and murder of Tiffany. Just as his trial was about to begin, William unexpectedly started confessing to other crimes in an attempt to reach a deal with the prosecution. Despite having eluded police for 19 years, he ultimately revealed the truth, having a history of aggravated kidnapping and other crimes. When shown photos of Laura Smither, Jessica, and Kelly Cox, he immediately accepted responsibility for their murders and disappearances, although denying any sexual motive behind his actions. William was questioned about his victims in Oklahoma. He agreed to cooperate with authorities by showing them the burial sites of two victims, Jessica and Kelly, on one condition: he would not face the death penalty. In April 2016, investigators followed him to a location in a Houston pasture where human remains were discovered. After several days of excavation, the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the remains belonged to Jessica. The search continued in Brazoria County, where another set of human remains was found. Dental records confirmed that these remains belonged to Kelly Cox. The trial for the murder of another victim, Tiffany, began in May 2021. William was found guilty by a jury on May 28, 2021, and received a death sentence on August 19, 2021, for her abduction and murder. After his murder conviction in Oklahoma, he was sent to Texas in March 2022 to face trial for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica. He pleaded guilty to all three charges and received a life imprisonment sentence in June 2022. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nha Varma. Megha Deshpande lived with her 21-year-old daughter, Ashlesha, and her 70-year-old mother, Rohini, in a luxurious neighborhood called Srinagar in Indore. This city known for consistently ranking as one of the cleanest in India. The fact that they resided in Srinagar, an area predominantly inhabited by the wealthy, suggested that the Deshpande family was financially well off. Megha worked for a multi-level marketing (MLM) company for a considerable time. MLM is also referred to as network marketing, direct selling, and pyramid selling. To understand how an MLM business works, imagine a pyramid structure. At the top is the company owner. When the owner recruits two individuals and they join the company, it creates a network. These two individuals then recruit more people to join the company, and the process continues. The company generates profit from each new member or associate that joins, allowing the business owner to constantly earn income through the growth of their network. Before moving to Indore, Megha lived in Yuan, a city approximately 35 miles away, with her husband, Nanai Deshpande. However, due to his job as a bank manager, Nanai remained in Yuan, while Megha relocated to Indore with her daughter and mother a few months ago. Thanks to Nanai's stable job and Megha's successful career in the MLM company, the Megha's family has a stable financial situation and does not have to worry about money. In the neighborhood where Megha lives, people are very united, and it is also very safe with very little crime. Residents have always felt safe, and nothing unusual has ever happened there until June 13, 2011, when that all changed. On that day, no one in Megha's family left the house until noon, and no one heard their voices. A neighbor walked by Megha's house, and then she noticed a very strange thing. Footprints made of bloody stains led around the house, alarming her. She quickly notified the landlord. And the landlord then knocked on the doors several times, but received no answer. Next, the landlord attempted to look inside through a window and was met with a very scary sight. 3 women were lying on the floor, their bodies covered in blood. Overcome with fear, he quickly alerted the police. The brutal murder of the Mega family members sent shockwaves through the community. By the time the police arrived at the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside their house. Upon entering the house, the police officers were met with a gruesome scene: the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered. The police secured the crime scene and began their investigation. During this process, they found 2 bullet shells inside the house. One of the shells was linked to the gunshot wound that killed Mega, who had been shot in the head. However, despite a thorough search of the house lobby, the police were unable to locate the second bullet. A forensic team was called in to collect evidence from the crime scene. The bodies of the 3 women were then sent for post-mortem examination. As news of the murder spread, the entire city of Indore was left reeling in shock. The post-mortem report later revealed that 21-year-old Ashlesha and her 70-year-old grandmother, Rohini, had died from excessive bleeding caused by multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report confirms that Mega was the only one shot to death. However, it raises a crucial question for the police: if 2 bullet shells were found, who was the second shot intended for? Mega's husband, along with the public, also started pressuring the police, demanding that they solve the case quickly so that the criminals are held accountable to the fullest extent of Indian law. This makes it even more urgent for the police to solve this case quickly. To do this, several teams were deployed to investigate. One team analyzed the call detail records of the 3 victims, Mega, Ashlesha, Rohini. Another team re-examined the forensic evidence. Initially, the police have collected a blood sample from the crime scene that didn't belong to Mega, Ashlesha, or Rohini. The police then detained and questioned various suspects from the surrounding area. Based on the evidence collected, the police have recorded this as a robbery and murder case. Further investigation of the phone records revealed that there was a phone number that had called Mega multiple times and she had long conversations with this number. After obtaining detailed information about the number, the police found it was registered to a girl named Nha. They then began tracking her location to gather potential leads in the case. One day, the police located Nha near an ATM in the area. They promptly sent a team to bring her to the police station for questioning. After being informed of the situation of the case, Nha was left astounded. She explained that she initially met Mega at a shopping mall. Then, Nha had bumped into Mega while rushing, causing Mega to drop some items. As Nha apologized and helped Mega gather her belongings, they engaged in conversation and developed a rapport. And Nha even driving Mega to her car, marking the start of their friendship. Nha also discovered that Mega worked for a multi-level marketing, MLM, company. After exchanging phone numbers, they occasionally spoke over the phone. Nha's interest in the MLM business model led her to discuss it with Mega. However, the police found Nha's story suspicious, as her words didn't match her body language. As a result, the police questioned her forcefully and in a confrontational manner. Nha initially tries to hide her dishonesty, but under intense police questioning, she confesses. She then told the police a story that even surprised them. Nha Varma was a 23-year-old beautician who was known for her beauty and cheerful personality. Her father, a van driver, had limited financial resources, making it challenging for Nha to pursue her dreams. During this time, Nha met Rahul, and they developed a close friendship that blossomed into romance. At 24, Rahul was handsome but also struggled financially. Despite their similar financial situations, they deeply loved each other and wanted to get married. They sought opportunities to rapidly build wealth and achieve a comfortable lifestyle, securing their financial future. Nha and Megha met for the first time. Megha, who had a taste for expensive jewelry, was wearing gold ornaments that day. Nha perceived Megha as wealthy due to her jewelry and decided to approach her. Nha started approaching Megha by deliberately bumping into her, start chatting and befriending her. Nha started thinking about robbing Megha after getting to call her through phone calls. Nha then shared her plan with her boyfriend Rahul, telling him that Megha was extremely wealthy, making her an easy target. Rahul liked the idea, as it would solve their financial problems and allow them to live comfortably once they were married. Following this, Rahul started making plans to kill Megha and the two other women in her house. He thought that if he could get away with the crime without anyone finding out, no one would be able to file a complaint against them. Rahul finalized his plan but needed a gun to carry it out. Luckily for him, his friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Nha, had a gun. Rahul had been planning to kill Megha and her family, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to execute his plan. That moment arrived on June 13, 2011. On that day, Nha called Megha and expressed interest in joining her multi-level marketing scheme, MLM. Unbeknownst to Megha, this was a ruse orchestrated by Rahul. Nha arrived at Megha's house early in the morning, and Megha asked her to fill out a membership form. However, Nha didn't know what information to fill in the form, so she asked Megha if she could get a friend arrive to help her. Megha agreed, and Nha then called Rahul, as planned. Rahul and his accomplice, Manoj, were waiting for Neha's call, and they immediately went to Megha's house. Once Rahul entered the house, he pulled out a gun and shot Megha at point-blank range, killing her instantly. The sound of this gunshot reached Ashlesha and Rohini, causing both of them to run into the lobby. Rahul and Manoj initially intimidated Ashlesha and her grandmother Rohini, demanding Ashlesha's ATM card and PIN in exchange for their lives. Ashlesha, hoping to be spared, quickly handed over the card. However, Rahul and Manoj were aware that they had been seen, and this posed a risk to their. To eliminate witnesses, Rahul attempted to shoot Ashlesha but accidentally shot himself in the foot instead. Manoj then took a knife and brutally murdered both Ashlesha and Rohini. After the killings, the three thieves, including Nha, Rahul, Manoj, stole approximately 1 million Indian rupees and valuable jewelry worth up to $500,000 rupees and Ashlesha's ATM card. Rahul, along with Nha and Manoj, had planned to use the ATM card to withdraw cash. However, their plan failed when Nha was arrested by the police. Rahul to file an untrue report at the police station and was arrested, but was later hospitalized due to gunshot wounds. The police matched Rahul's blood sample from the crime scene to one taken from him. It was a match. The police quickly solved the case and arrested the suspects. Following a prolonged and contentious court case, the three defendants, Nha, Rahul, Manoj, were sentenced to death by hanging in December 2013. The district court handed down this severe punishment due to the heinous nature of the crime, in which the defendants killed women from 3 generations of the Megha family. Physical evidence, including blood-stained clothing, knives, and jewelry, was recovered from the defendants by the police. One of the defendants, Nha, is currently serving her sentence in the central jail. Notably, she has been teaching a beauty parlor course to fellow female inmates while incarcerated. This case was notable for being the first time the district court had imposed a death sentence on a woman. Nha and Rahul's desire for quick wealth led them to get involved in a life of crime. It is fortunate that the perpetrators were caught. If Megha had not worn her valuable jewelry to the mall and had not trusted a stranger she met there, the outcome may have been different. Megha's husband, Nana Deshpande, was pleased with the court's decision and praised the judiciary and the police for their efforts. Hello again, true crime fans. we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ronald Platt. July 28, 1996, began as a typical summer day in South England. Captain John Kopek and his son prepared for a fishing trip on their trawler, the Melkerry. Despite an unsuccessful day, they decided to try their luck in a spot known as the Roughs. They lowered the net into the water and waited. The two men felt a tug on the net, indicating that it was a large catch. However, when they pulled the net up, they were shocked to find that it was not a fish, but instead a badly decomposed body of a man. Captain Kopek immediately contacted the Brixham Coast Guard to report the discovery. The body was in a state of severe decomposition, indicating that it had been in the ocean for some time. Fish had nibbled at parts of the body, but despite the decomposition, the man's clothing was intact: a long-sleeved shirt, corduroy pants, and brown shoes. And there was no identification on the body. The only identifying features found on the dead man were a smudged tattoo on his right hand and a Rolex watch on his wrist. The body was taken to the medical examiner's office in Devon for further examination. It was estimated that the man was between 40 and 50 years old. A distinctive tattoo of a cluster of stars was found on his body. His only severe injury was a head wound, which was not fatal. This, combined with other bruising, suggested that he had been dragged along the seabed before being pulled into a boat. However, his lungs were filled with water, indicating that he had ultimately drowned. Police suspected that the man might have fallen overboard during a ferry crossing. The primary method for identifying him was through dental records, as they would be on file if he was a British citizen. However, this process would take some time. It was by chance that a mortuary technician noticed the man's watch, a Rolex Oyster self-winding model that was fully waterproof. The watch required regular motion to stay active and, as an original model, its ownership could potentially be traced. Police examined the watch found on the unidentified man and discovered a crucial clue. The calendar feature showed the date July 22, indicating that the man had likely drowned 2 days earlier, on July 20, 1996. Further examination revealed a serial number hidden between the wristband and the watch face. Police sent this number to Rolex to verify its authenticity and determine who owned the watch. The mystery surrounding the man, now known as Rolex Man, gained further clues a few weeks later, after a records search identified the watch's owner as Ronald Joseph Platt. Ronald Joseph Platt was a 51-year-old TV repairman born in Calgary, Canada. His family later moved to Britain, where he grew up. Ronald remained unmarried and had served in the British Army as part of his national service. Those who knew him well described Ronald as a quiet and introverted man with a deep love for his native Canada. Ronald bought a Rolex watch in Germany in 1967, which became one of his most prized possessions. Ronald was so attached to the watch that, according to his former partners, he even wore it in the shower. Detective Constable Clenahan from the Devon and Cornwall Police was assigned to the case from the start. The police investigation revealed that Ronald's last known address was in Essex, which was hundreds of miles away from where his body was found. Clenahan contacted the Essex Police Department for assistance. Inspector Peter Redmond offered to visit the address to help with the investigation. When he visited the house, Peter found it vacant. Peter then contacted the owner and was told that the owner had moved out some time ago. However, Peter was provided with a letter of introduction that could assist in the investigation. The letter provided the address and contact details of a man named David Davis. Detective Peter called the number and got in touch with Davis. Before delivering the news, Peter asked Davis about his relationship with Ronald. Peter then informed Davis that a body had been found in Devon that was likely to be his friend. Davis agreed to meet with the police in Essex to discuss the matter further. When they met, Peter found Davis to be friendly and confident, but surprisingly calm, and asked very few questions about Ronald's death. Davis and Ronald had been friends for several years. Davis hadn't seen Ronald in over 3 months, and the last time they met, Davis had given him a loan to start an electrical business in France. Since then, Davis had assumed Ronald was living in France. During their conversation, Peter discovered that the symbol tattooed on Ronald's hand was a maple leaf, the national symbol of Canada. After providing all the necessary information, Davis left the station, assuring Detective Peter that he would send a photo of Ronald. The Essex police were then able to conclude their investigation, forming the theory that Ronald had fallen overboard and drowned in the channel. This theory aligned with Davis's account of the events, suggesting it was simply an unfortunate accident. With the Essex case over, Clenaghan had a problem on his end. He tried to contact Davis several times but was unsuccessful. Clenaghan then asked his colleague, Detective Peter of Essex, to help him contact Davis. Peter agreed and visited Davis at his home in Wooden Walter, a rural area of Essex with only 4 houses. They continued to describe Ronald to Peter, and he suddenly realized that the man they were describing was none other than the recently deceased Ronald Platt. This sudden revelation aroused Peter's suspicions, and he quickly contacted Clenaghan in Devon to share this surprising discovery. Police from both counties began to suspect that there was more to the case than initially appeared. Peter turned his attention to gathering information about the man impersonating his deceased friend. Peter visited an elderly couple, Frank and Aubrey, who shared with him the story of Ronald Platt, a young man with a wife and 2 young children. The couple mentioned that Ronald and his family frequently vacationed in Devon, where they owned a yacht, although they could not remember the name of the yacht. In Devon, Clenaghan reviewed the evidence and began re-interrogating old witnesses. His first was John Coppock, who revealed that when Ronald's body was found, a 10-pound anchor had also been pulled up in the net. John Coppock had given the anchor to a friend, who then passed it on to his mother to sell. Fortunately, the anchor had not yet been sold, allowing the police to retrieve it as evidence. Clenaghan's next step was to interview people who knew Ronald. He contacted Ronald's brother, Brian. Brian mentioned Elaine Boyes, Ronald's old friend of 13 years. Police then spoke with Elaine Boyes and discovered the connection between Ronald Platt and Davis. Elaine Boyes had met Davis in 1991 while working as a receptionist at a fine arts auction house in Harrogate, England. She recalled Davis as being tall, engaging, and charming. During their conversation, Davis mentioned his plans to move to Yorkshire, and the topic turned to job opportunities. Davis offered Elaine Boyes a job at his company, but she declined, explaining that she and Ronald were planning to move to Canada soon. Davis offered to help Elaine Boyes and Ronald save money to move to Canada. Elaine Boyes soon became Davis's executive assistant, and she soon introduced Ronald to Davis. The 2 men quickly became close friends. Elaine Boyes and Ronald were fascinated by Davis's lavish stories and impressed by his lavish lifestyle. Davis then offered them a business opportunity, proposing that they become directors of his company, the Cavendish Corporation. Although Elaine Boyes was initially hesitant, Davis explained that he wanted to keep a low profile due to his ex-wife, a wealthy doctor in New York, who allegedly still demanded alimony payments from him. By this point, Elaine Boyes and Ronald had developed a trust in Davis and believed that he was genuinely trying to protect her from his ex-wife. Davis sent both Elaine Boyes and Platt on business trips to Europe to negotiate deals on his behalf, gradually drawing them into his scheme. They transferred money to various offshore bank accounts without asking Davis what he intended to do with it, trusting him greatly because of his religious nature. On Christmas Day 1992, Davis invited Elaine Boyes and Ronald to visit Davis and his daughter, Noelle. After a sumptuous meal, they exchanged gifts. Elaine Boyes presented Davis with a card titled "The Greatest Gift Ever." In return, Davis gave the couple 2 plane tickets to Canada, provided they used them before February 1993. While Elaine Boyes was overwhelmed by the short notice, Ronald was overjoyed that his lifelong dream of returning to Canada had finally come true thanks to Davis. In preparation for their upcoming trip, Davis quickly made arrangements. To ensure he could effectively manage their affairs while they were away, he asked Elaine Boyes and Ronald to stamp their signatures and leave their driver's licenses with him in case they needed to prove their identity. Elaine Boyes and Ronald agreed, as they trusted Davis and were grateful for the new beginning he provided. Consequently, in February 1993, they left for Canada. However, the harsh winter conditions, lack of job opportunities, and resulting financial strain quickly put pressure on their relationship. Elaine Boyes and Ronald's relationship began to unravel due to increasing tension, ultimately causing them to drift apart. 5 months later, Elaine Boyes traveled to England to serve as a bridesmaid at her sister's wedding, with no intention of returning to Canada. Davis, who had become a family friend, was also invited to the wedding. During the event, he spoke with Elaine Boyes and asked about Ronald. Upon learning that Elaine Boyes had ended her relationship with Ronald and would not be returning to Canada, Davis was upset. He attempted to persuade Elaine Boyes to give Ronald another chance, but she refused. Davis packed up his life, said goodbye to Elaine Boyes, and left her with his mobile number. However, their friendship eventually dissolved, and the phone calls ceased. Ronald and Elaine Boyes had lost contact. Ever since Elaine Boyes moved away from Canada, she had not heard from Ronald, her former lover, or Davis, who had been her best friend. So when Davis suddenly contacted Elaine Boyes in late 1996, their conversation was somewhat awkward. They barely exchanged any important information, and surprisingly, Davis did not even mention Ronald's name. The conversation was brief, and they did not keep in touch after that. He failed to tell her that Ronald was dead. After the interview, Elaine Boyes suspected Davis was involved in Ronald's death. Police needed more concrete evidence. They started questioning witnesses. Following the wedding in Harrogate, Davis quickly moved to Devon with his family. There, he introduced himself as Ronald Platt. He also introduced his pregnant daughter as his wife, sometimes calling her Elaine Boyes. It was well known that Davis owned a yacht. Witnesses reported seeing Ronald and Davis together a month before Ronald's body was discovered. They claimed to have registered on Steam Packet as brothers, David and Ronald Platt. By this point, police knew Davis had lied about Ronald and his knowledge of Ronald's death. They needed one last piece of evidence to confirm their suspicions. Police analyzed mobile records and discovered that the calls made by Davis originated from the same area where the medical examiner believed Ronald had drowned. This led Essex police to plan a sting operation to arrest Davis on suspicion of Ronald's murder. The police were informed by Elaine Boyes that Davis had arranged to meet her for coffee at Chelmsford train station. The police arrived at the train station. However, Davis had escaped. Not giving up, Detective Peter decided to drive to the Davis family home. Pete called for backup. He speculated that Davis might be armed. As the police prepared to act, a taxi stopped at the entrance of the house, and Davis quickly escaped. The police promptly gave chase, and Davis was eventually caught and forced to surrender at gunpoint after Davis was arrested. Police took his fingerprints and submitted them to an international database. Albert Johnson Walker, a man on Interpol's wanted list and Canada's most wanted fugitive, was identified as the owner of the discovered prints. Albert Johnson's life story began in Canada. Born on August 9, 1945, in Hamilton, Ontario, Albert Johnson had big ambitions despite dropping out of high school. He had a charismatic presence. Albert Johnson met his ex-wife, Barbara MacDonald. They married in 1968. The couple started a family early and had 7 children, 3 girls and 4 boys. Albert Johnson was born in Paris, Ontario, where he and his wife Barbara started a freelance accounting business. The business grew rapidly, and within a decade, it had expanded to 6 locations with more than 30 employees. However, Albert Johnson deceived his friends and clients by secretly transferring their investments to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Over time, Albert Johnson's dishonesty wasn't the only problem he faced. His marriage began to fall apart due to his many affairs. Furthermore, those he had stolen money from began to become suspicious. With his empire on the brink of collapse, Albert Johnson decided to go on the run in 1990. Under the pretext of taking his 15-year-old daughter Sheena on a skiing trip to Europe, Albert Johnson escaped. Barbara discovered the incident and, concerned for her daughter's safety, reported her missing. The police tracked Albert Johnson to London, but lost track of him. Albert Johnson assumed a new identity, stolen from a client. He now went by the name Davis Wallace, and his daughter Sheena changed her name to Noel. Although he evaded the police, the name Davis linked him back to his real identity. Davis Wallace needed a new identity, and his opportunity came when he met Ronald Platt. Ronald had a strong interest in Canada. Davis used this information to his advantage and created a new identity for himself. However, his plans began to fall apart in 1995 when Ronald contacted him, saying that Ronald was frustrated with life in Canada and was moving back to Essex to be closer to Davis. This development posed a problem for Davis, as having 2 Ronald Platts with the same birth date in the same area would have raised suspicion. To solve this problem, Davis came up with a plan. He bought a yacht, the Lady Jane, and took his family and Ronald to Totnes and Devon to celebrate the launch. During this trip, Davis and Ronald purchased a new 10-pound anchor. Davis invited Ronald to Devon for the weekend, to go fishing and enjoy the coast. Davis took Ronald to his boat, the Lady Jane, far enough from shore to avoid detection. Once alone, Davis hit Ronald over the head with the anchor, knocking him unconscious. Davis then searched Ronald's pockets for identification and retrieved it. Davis tied the anchor to Ronald's waist to weigh him down and threw him into the water, intending to make it look like an accident. However, Davis made the mistake of leaving Ronald's Rolex watch on his wrist, which was later used to foil the carefully planned crime and bring Davis to justice. Davis's trial began in 1998. During the trial, some key evidence was presented to the court. The anchor found in the net along with Ronald Platt's body. Forensic experts analyzed the wound on Ronald's head and determined that it matched the shape of the anchor. Further investigation found traces of zinc on Ronald's belt, which matched the zinc found on the anchor. It was discovered that the anchor had been attached to Ronald's belt to drown him in the sea. A search of the yacht, Lady Jane, also uncovered significant evidence. Hairs matching Ronald's were found on a cushion, and his fingerprint was discovered on the bag that had been used to carry the anchor back to the yacht. Additionally, blood was found near the rails, providing further evidence to the case. Davis's hoarding habits cost him, as documents were seized and used to prove his sham business ventures and his trail of deception. Elaine Boy's testimony provided evidence that Davis would lose a lot if Ronald Platt returned to England. And his daughter Sheena testified that Davis had been out on a yacht and looked disheveled and agitated when he returned later that day of the murder. Sheena also spoke candidly about life with Davis and how she was constantly harassed by her father and feared for her own safety. Supreme Court Justice Neil Butterfield said Davis was an extremely intelligent and ruthless individual who posed a threat to others. He stated that Davis's crimes were carefully planned and executed with precision. As a result, Davis was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. In 2005, he was allowed to move to Canada to serve his sentence. 2 years later, at the age of 61, Davis was given an additional 4-year sentence to be served concurrently. In 2015, Davis applied for parole but withdrew it at the last minute. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rowena Irani. Rowena Irani was born on February 18, 1994, in Karachi, Pakistan, to parents Tarun and Bam Irani. In 2004, when Rowena was 10 years old, her family moved to Wichita, Kansas, in search of better opportunities. The goal was to provide Rowena and her older brother, Rashid, with a brighter future in America. However, the 9.11 tragedy 3 years earlier had created a climate of prejudice that affected the Irani family, making it difficult for Rowena and Rashid to form friendships due to the hostility they faced. Despite the initial difficulties, Rowena and Rashid eventually settled in and expanded their social circle. Rowena joined her high school's ROTC program and drill team, which helped her develop skills, even though she didn't plan to pursue a military career. After a tough start, Rowena blossomed into a strong-willed, friendly, and caring individual. Rowena graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 2012 and enrolled at Wichita State University, choosing to live at home while pursuing a degree in psychology. Her goal was to earn a master's degree and become a counselor for teenagers. Rowena's mother was extremely proud of her dedication to her studies. From the start, the Irani family's sacrifices clearly had a positive impact on their children. Rowena, in particular, wanted to help others reach their full potential. She started working at the Wichita Children's Home, a place for neglected, abused, and emotionally distressed youth. Rowena formed strong bonds with the children, showing her remarkable ability to understand and support them. Rowena made the children feel welcome and cherished, creating a sense of security. Every morning, Rowena would gently wake the children, and every evening, she would bid them farewell. The children looked forward to sharing their daily experiences with her, no matter how small. Rowena also helped the children set goals and find ways to achieve them, showing her dedication to their well-being. Rowena demonstrated a strong commitment to helping troubled youth. And her outstanding academic record as a psychology major indicated she had found her purpose in supporting others. She seemed to be living the American dream her parents had sought. However, problems in her personal life soon arose, ultimately leading to a tragic outcome. In May 2016, Rowena reconnected with Dane Owens, a family friend, at her brother's wedding. Dane came from a wealthy Kansas family and had joined the U.S. Army after high school. His military service ended abruptly due to a severe traumatic brain injury from an explosion. After a medical discharge, Dane attended Kansas State University, where he met Rowena. They soon developed strong feelings for each other. But problems soon arose due to Dane's behavior. He was possessive, controlling, and had a quick temper. People close to Rowena said that Dane became obsessed with the idea of marrying her and starting a family right away, even though she wasn't sure about it. At 22, Rowena wanted to finish college before making such a big decision. Dane's insistence on marriage and his intense behavior scared Rowena, her feel like the relationship was moving too fast. When she asked for space, Dane wrote a disturbing letter, begging her not to leave him and hinting that he might harm himself if she did. This led Rowena to end the relationship. At first, it seemed like Dane accepted Rowena's decision when she reiterated that she wasn't ready for marriage or starting a family. However, just 1 week after giving her space, Dane started pressuring her again about getting engaged, planning a wedding, and having kids. His actions made it clear that he saw Rowena as a prize to be won. Instead of supporting her education and career, Dane seemed determined to limit Rowena to a domestic role. Rowena is worried about her relationship with Dane because she feels he is too controlling of her, and this makes her wonder if they are really a good couple. By September 2016, Dane's increasing aggression had become alarming, prompting Rowena to confide in her brother, Rashid, a police officer. She shared several disturbing incidents, including Dane's claims of committing brutal killings during his military service. He even bragged about murdering women and children while deployed in Afghanistan. Rowena found these revelations deeply disturbing. Furthermore, Dane had expressed his intention to kill an ex-girlfriend who had ended their relationship. He confessed that following the breakup, he became consumed by a desire for revenge and struggled with emotional instability, to the point where he even contemplated committing murder. Rushd agreed with Rowena's assessment that Dane posed a genuine threat and he seemed capable of violent acts against her. On September 23, Rowena ended her relationship with Dane. She blocked his phone number and social media profiles to distance herself. However, Dane refused to accept the breakup and started planning his revenge. Despite recovering from shoulder surgery and being unable to handle a firearm properly, Dane bought a .45 caliber handgun. On October 3, over a week after the breakup, he secretly visited Rowena's residence while her family was away. Surveillance cameras caught him parking his vehicle away from the house and approaching stealthily, hiding the firearm in a sling due to his injured arm. Dane entered the house through an unlocked door and waited for Rowena. When Rowena appeared, he aimed his gun and fatally shot her in the head. This was a deliberate and carefully planned violent act committed by someone who was excessively controlling. After shooting Rowena, Dane quickly left the house through the back door and drove away to avoid being caught. During his escape, he stopped to get rid of important evidence, including the handgun magazine and Rowena's phone, in various ponds in Wichita. Meanwhile, Rowena was left alone in her home, severely injured and bleeding heavily, for several hours. At around 4 p.m., her mother, Tarun, returned home after being dropped off from work. Tarun was worried because Rowena usually picked her up. But she couldn't reach Rowena by phone. She got a ride from a coworker and went home, where she found Rowena lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood, with severe head injuries. Tarun immediately called for emergency services, but it was too late to save Rowena. Rowena's condition was extremely serious due to a gunshot wound and significant blood loss. She fought for her life at Wesley Medical Center for nearly 24 hours, while her family stayed by her side, hoping for a miracle. Tragically, she passed away on October 4 at just 22 years old. Her promising life was tragically ended by a violent act. Despite their intense grief, Rowena's family was determined to find justice for her murder. Rushd quickly focused the investigation on Dane, Rowena's ex-boyfriend, who had been causing her a great deal of fear before her death. Dane was soon found and brought in for questioning. After being arrested and taken to the police station, he admitted to holding a grudge against Rowena for breaking up with him. When questioned further, Dane tried to claim that Rowena's death was an accident, but the evidence proved this was not true. Dane told investigators that he had shown up at Rowena's home unannounced, carrying a loaded .45 caliber pistol and hoping to talk about getting back together. However, Dane claimed that the firearm was hidden in his arm sling and he never intended to threaten or harm Rowena when he entered the house looking for her. He said when Rowena suddenly appeared, he was startled, causing a moment of panic due to post-traumatic stress disorder from time in the military. Dean alleged that he accidentally fired a shot in her direction. He explained to detectives that he was left shocked and horrified after the bullet accidentally struck Rowena in the head, resulting in her immediate collapse to the ground. Panicked, he fled the scene and later got rid of the evidence. Despite his claim that the shooting was an accident caused by a reflex, detectives did not believe him. The security footage and his admission of sneaking up on Rowena with a loaded gun, his attempt to dispose of evidence, and the execution-style gunshot wound to Rowena's head all suggested a planned and deliberate murder. In November 2018, Dane Owens stood trial for Rowena's murder after years of delays, with the case being heard by a jury. The prosecution presented case with substantial evidence, leaving no doubt about Dane's guilt. They portrayed Dane as a possessive and controlling individual who turned violent when rejected. Dane's delusional fantasies led him to end Rowena's life. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Dane guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary, resulting in a life sentence in Kansas. Dane was punished for taking Rowena's life due to his wounded pride. He will not be eligible for parole for 25 years, and his chances of release are low due to the brutality of his actions. He is currently serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. Rowena's life was ended by someone she once loved. It's heartbreaking to think of the terrible actions of Dane, who took Rowena's life, depriving her of a bright future at such a young age. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Grace Milane. Grace Emmy Rose Milane was born on December 2, 1996 in Wickford, Essex, to her parents Gillian and David Milane. She was the youngest of her 3 siblings. She was known as a lovely, outgoing, cheerful daughter who thought about her family and loved creativity and art. Because her family was so close to her, Grace maintained daily contact with her siblings and parents, even when she rented a house near her school, Lincoln University, where she studied advertising and marketing. In 2018, Grace Milane, 21, graduated with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing. Like most young people at that age, Grace decided that she would take a year off before settling into her career. She decided to travel to South America before going to New Zealand. She embarked on a 10-month solo adventure in October 2018. She initially visited Peru before making her way to South America. On November 19th, Grace arrived in New Zealand and checked into the base backpackers hostel in Auckland, ready for a 2-week holiday traveling around the Upper North Island. It was in New Zealand that Grace met her Tinder match, a 28-year-old man named Jesse Kempson, on December 1st. Jesse Kempson was born on December 28, 1991, in Lower Hutt, New Zealand, but he grew up in Wellington. His parents separated when he was young, and for a time, he was raised by his grandparents. He moved to Australia with his mother as a teenager, but in 2016 he returned to New Zealand and lived in a hostel in Wellington. Grace didn't know that Jesse had a darker side, a more cruel soul, in him. Jesse was known to be a very charming guy, and he used that to manipulate people. On one occasion, Jesse lied to his former landlord that he was a professional softball player, newly signed by the New Zealand national softball team, the Black Sox, and claimed that his contract money would come so he could pay the rent. That went on for 2 months. And the homeowner only learned the truth when Black Sox management announced that no one knew who Jesse was. Unfortunately, the homeowner later discovered that he had fled elsewhere without his knowledge. He also sometimes claimed to have a bachelor's degree in international law, came from a millionaire family looking to buy a top restaurant in Auckland, had connections to the New Zealand Immigration Service, and many other lies that he mentioned to everyone. In reality, Jesse was nothing more than a dreamer who could only impress people with wild lies. His former roommates in a Green Lane boarding house found Jesse disturbing and untrustworthy before he moved into the City Life apartment. On another occasion, a woman he lived with claimed he stole money from her house and ran away again, costing the City Life homeowner thousands of dollars. Jesse was an enigma to many. He lied throughout his life, and it seemed to work. He also seemed to get away with it time and time again. Back at the dorm where Grace was staying, she was chatting happily with Jesse. Grace had no doubts and was captivated by Jesse. Grace even sent a text message to her best friend Anna back home, telling Anna that she agreed to Jesse's confession. Since it was Saturday and her 22nd birthday was the next day, Grace didn't want to be alone and decided to go out. She decided it was time to meet Jesse. Jesse lived just 5 minutes away from where Grace lived, and Grace thought they needed to get to know each other a little better. On that special day, Grace got ready for her big evening and felt nothing but excitement and optimism. Grace left the base backpackers hostel in Auckland at 6 p.m. On the evening of December 1st, she wore a black dress and carried a small handbag. Little did she know that her night would take a devastating turn. Initially, the evening seemed to have gone well as she and Jesse visited the Blue Stone Room and left together around 9:30. However, when her 22nd birthday arrived the next day, Grace did not respond to birthday wishes from family and friends. This unusual silence caused anxiety and panic, especially among her family members. It was unusual for Grace not to keep in touch as she regularly updated her family about her trip and shared photos of her adventures. Therefore, Grace's parents contacted Auckland police and reported her missing on December 5th. Thanks to an extensive network of CCTV cameras across the city and reports from witnesses, police were able to quickly track Grace's movements on the night she disappeared. They also identified the man with her, Jesse Cameleri, who became a key figure in the investigation. Jesse stopped at the Blue Stone Room, a local bar next to the City Life Hotel where he was staying, on the night he was supposed to meet Grace. About half an hour before the scheduled meeting, Jesse was seen drinking 4 bottles of beer, sitting alone in a bar. Meanwhile, Grace arrived early at the Sky Tower, the location they had agreed upon. This location was chosen because of its high visibility and beauty. Sky Tower is a famous landmark in New Zealand's largest city and can be easily recognized from afar. When Jesse arrived, the two quickly recognized each other and greeted each other warmly, with Jesse hugging her as she smiled and approached him. They then went to a restaurant and burger bar on the first floor of the adjacent Sky City complex. Their entire time together at Sky City was captured on camera, showing Jesse and Grace chatting while riding the escalator to Andy's Burger and Bar. When they arrived, they ordered cocktails from the bartender and sat at the table to talk. They left the bar after an hour and a half and walked to a nearby Mexican restaurant. Over a period of time, they consumed a large number of drinks, including 2 pitchers of margaritas and a pitcher of sangria. They then moved to the Blue Stone Room, where Jesse had previously been drinking alone. At 8:40 p.m., Jesse gently kissed Grace. This marked the beginning of several shared kisses that took place over the next hour. During this time, there were brief interruptions, once when Jesse walked away for a moment. And another time when Grace checked her phone, as well as when she sent her last text to her friend, Anna. Jesse eventually walked away, took out his phone, and left a message on Grace's Facebook profile, saying she looked beautiful and radiant. Unbeknownst to him, this seemingly harmless act eventually turned the detectives towards him. Around 9:30 p.m., Jesse and Grace left the venue, walked toward the City Life Hotel lobby, and took the elevator to room 308. What happened while Jesse and Grace were in the hotel room is unknown. What is confirmed is that Jesse killed her. At 1:30 a.m., Grace's body was brought into room 308. Following the discovery, police determined that Grace had never left the building and that Jesse had chosen not to seek emergency assistance following the death of Grace. After Grace's death, Jesse conducted numerous internet searches using his cell phone. His online searches included searching for the terms hottest fire and Waitakere Range. Waitakere was the area where Jesse later tried to bury Grace's body in a shallow grave. Jesse also browsed a website to find video content. In addition to these actions, Jesse also took 7 intimate and explicit photos of Grace's body after her death. These photos included close-ups and posed shots that he arranged to take. The next morning, while Grace's body was still in room 308, Jesse sent a message to a woman he met on Tinder to go on a date the same day. Jesse's actions continued and he was recorded on CCTV as he went to an entertainment store to buy a suitcase and a supermarket to buy cleaning supplies. After these purchases, He rented a red Toyota hatchback and went out in the afternoon to meet the woman from Tinder at a bar in Ponsonby called RRY, while Grace's body remained in his room. On December 2nd, Jesse returned to his hotel room around 5:45 p.m. and rented a carpet cleaning machine, saying he needed it to remove a red wine stain. Then, he parked the rental car outside the hotel, took the luggage cart from the front desk, and went upstairs. He returned with the cart, which then contained 2 large suitcases. He loaded his luggage into the car and moved it to a nearby parking lot. Unbeknownst to the others, one of the suitcases, a silver one, contained Grace's body, while the other suitcase was used as bait to avoid arousing suspicion. Throughout the day, security cameras recorded Jesse changing clothes multiple times. Early the next morning, around 6:15 a.m., Jesse was seen leaving the hotel and driving away, stopping briefly to buy a shovel at a store outside of town. On December 7, 2018, Grace's father, David Milane, traveled to New Zealand to make a sincere appeal for information about his daughter's disappearance. A detective identified Jesse as a person of interest after Grace's mother noticed he had sent her a Facebook message at 9:29 p.m. on December 1st, just 11 minutes before Jesse and Grace left Blue Stone Room and went to his room. During Detective Diana Levinson's initial questioning, Jesse claimed that he met Grace but broke up with her at 10 p.m. on Saturday, and that was the last time he saw her. However, detectives obtained CCTV footage from the hotel, which proved Jesse was lying. At the second interview, Jesse was forced to admit to killing Grace, but he claimed it was a sexual accident after she asked him to strangle her in an attempt to make the experience more pleasurable. After the interview, he was arrested and led police to the location of Grace's body. The body was discovered about 4 p.m. on December 9th in Waitakere Ranges Regional Park, off Scenic Drive. An autopsy was conducted on December 10th. An autopsy showed Grace had been strangled and bruises on her body showed she had been restrained. Jesse's trial began in Auckland on November 4, 2019. Jesse claimed Grace's death was an accident caused by rough sex gone wrong, but the jury rejected this explanation and found him guilty. Jesse Kempson had been convicted of murder on November 22, 2019, at the age of 28. During his trial, it had become clear that he had a history of making women feel extremely uncomfortable, especially those he had met or communicated with on Tinder. 8 months before meeting his victim, Jesse had dated another British tourist on Tinder and had taken her back to his motel room in Oakland. When she had refused to have sex with him, he had assaulted her while she had been crying and frozen in bed with fear. The female tourist had kept the incident a secret until she had recognized Jesse in the media after he had been charged with murder. Jesse's online interactions with another woman had also raised concerns. He had shared explicit messages where he had detailed his sexual preferences and had explained why he had them. It was believed that his desire to control and dominate might have contributed to Grace's death. In a separate trial, Jesse had been convicted of assaulting his ex-girlfriend. He had assaulted her, had threatened her with a butcher knife, and had forced her to perform humiliating acts. Jesse had claimed that he had been sent by the CIA to kill her, displaying a disturbing pattern of behavior. Throughout the trial, Jesse had shown no remorse for his actions and had refused to accept responsibility. On February 21, 2020, Jesse had received a sentence of life in prison with a minimum of 17 years without parole. The tragic events surrounding Grace's story had highlighted the need for increased safety measures for travelers, especially young women hoping to explore the world. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Neil Enwistle. Neil Enwistle was born on September 18, 1978, in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England, to Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle. He grew up in a humble home with his younger brother, Russell. His father worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor counselor, while his mother worked as a cook in a school cafeteria. After finishing high school, Neil Enwistle enrolled in the University of York, where he studied electronic engineering and business management. During this time, Enwistle met an American student named Rachel Souza who was attending York as a study abroad student. Rachel was originally from the Kingston area in Massachusetts, had attended Silver Lake Region High School before going to Holy Cross College in Worcester. While studying abroad in York for a year, she met Neil Enwistle on the rowing team. Neil Enwistle was withdrawn, shy, and indecisive, rarely interacting with others. Rachel, on the other hand, exuded confidence, was cheerful, outgoing, and well-liked. Her American roots brought an undeniable charm to her personality, and Rachel was well received by the other members of the rowing team. Over time, Neil Enwistle and Rachel found themselves drawn to each other, eventually spending more and more time together. Benjamin Pryor, a close friend of Neil Enwistle and Rachel's since college, said the couple were very understanding, affectionate and caring towards each other. While Neil Enwistle worked at a defense and security technology company based in Malvern, Worcestershire, Rachel pursued a career in education after completing her studies in 2002. Rachel took up a teaching role in English, drama and theater studies at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch, nurturing young minds through the arts. In a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, Neil Enwistle happily shared about his upcoming marriage to Rachel. They met through rowing, although he expressed dissatisfaction with life south of the border in Birmingham. He was happy with his upcoming marriage. In August 2003, Neil Enwistle and Rachel got married in 2 ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK, and the other in Massachusetts, USA. After the US ceremony, they had a reception in the UK in November of the same year. Neil Enwistle shared the early days of their married life on a family website, including their Christmas 2004 trip to the Mediterranean. In April 2005, their daughter, Lillian Rose, was born. Neil Enwistle and Rachel decided to move to the United States. They initially lived with Rachel's mother and stepfather in Carver, Massachusetts, until they purchased their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home was located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, creating a peaceful setting close to a major city. Despite Neil Entwistle's efforts to find work as a computer programmer and IT specialist, he encountered difficulties in finding work, leading to financial stress and mounting debt. To ease the financial burden, Neil Enwistle turned to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business was affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, forcing eBay to investigate fraud. An investigation into Neil Entwistle's eBay activities uncovered that he was using multiple accounts under different names. Further investigation revealed that Neil Enwistle was involved in running a website called millimaker.co.uk. This website promoted a get-rich-quick scheme that promised to help people in the adult entertainment industry make a guaranteed $6,000 per month within 6 months. The website also claimed to offer 24/7 assistance. However, these claims ultimately led to the website being shut down. Neil Entwistle used online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited several websites to pursue relationships looking for sexual partners. On Adult Friend Finder, Neil Entwistle created a profile and emailed several women expressing his interest in meeting sexual partners. An investigation found incriminating evidence on Neil Entwistle's laptop. In his profile, Neil Enwistle stated that he was interested in meeting American women of different ages. Neil Enwistle also mentioned that he wanted to confirm whether American women were better in bed than women from other countries. Neil Entwistle's profile indicated that he was looking for a specific type of casual relationship and was open to meeting people with similar interests. Testimony at the trial revealed Neil Entwistle had continued his interest in escort services up to January 18, 2006. Online searches he conducted on Google included Blonde Bay Escort Service, Sex Escort Services Westboro, and Escort in Worcester. In their defense, Neil Entwistle's lawyers claimed that his wife, Rachel, was dissatisfied with their sex life. However, when reviewing Neil Entwistle's internet search history, it is revealed that Neil Enwistle had much darker motives than seeking out prostitutes and seeking relationships with other women. During this time, Neil Enwistle visited his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo, in Carver, Massachusetts. Joe Matarazzo, a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club, had previously taught Neil Entwistle how to shoot. Neil Entwistle also had a .22 caliber revolver with Joe Matarazzo's family. However, on this occasion, Neil Entwistle planned to steal a gun from Joe Matarazzo's family. Neil Entwistle went to his in-laws' home, found a hidden gun, and took it back to his house in Hopkinton. Once home, he secretly hid the firearm, waiting for the right moment to carry out a violent act against his family. On January 20, 2006, Neil Entwistle entered the master bedroom of his home, where his wife, Rachel, and their 9-month-old daughter, Lillian, were sleeping in their new bed. Neil Entwistle shot Rachel in the head and then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and also hit Rachel in the left chest. Later that day, Neil Entwistle returned to Carver with the uncleaned weapon. He would later claim that he had gone shopping at Staples on that Friday and discovered his family dead when he got home. After leaving Carver, Neil Entwistle drove to Boston's Logan Airport on the evening of January 20, 2006. At the airport, he made 2 successful ATM withdrawals totaling $800, but 3 additional attempts to withdraw $420 were declined. The next day, January 21, 2006, Neil Entwistle bought a one-way ticket to London without checking any luggage. He boarded a British Airways flight that departed Boston at 8:15 p.m. that evening. Unbeknownst to Neil Entwistle, several neighbors he had invited for dinner, including Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen, arrived at his home around 7 p.m. to find it locked with the lights on inside. Concerned for Rachel's safety, neighbors attempted to contact her mother, but were unable to reach her. They then called 911 at around 8:30. Police arrived at Neil Entwistle's home to search for clues about the missing family. Upon entering, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the bedroom, noticing a large unmade bed, but nothing unusual. After completing their search, the police locked the house and left. However, Joanna Gatley and Maureen were still worried and decided to spend the night in the car outside the house, hoping that Rachel's family would return. To cope with the cold weather, they made several trips to the gas station restroom. The following Sunday morning, Joanna Gatley and Maureen gained entry to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a next-door neighbor the night before. Inside, Joanna Gatley and Maureen discovered dishes and leftover food in the kitchen, indicating that the family had just finished eating. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the couple had bathed their infant daughter. They proceeded to the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally checked the living room. Rachel's mother and stepfather then arrived at Rachel's house, and together they searched around the house. After assessing the situation, they decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. The police arrived at Rachel's house. Sergeant Sutton entered the basement and detected a foul odor. He followed the stench into the house to the master bedroom, where he found the bodies of Rachel and her infant child, Lillian. The mother's body was lying on a bed, covered in clothes. Rachel had her arms spread across Lillian's chest, both of them wearing pajamas. Autopsy results showed that Rachel died from a gunshot wound to the head, while Lillian was shot in the torso. DNA evidence was also found on the barrel of the gun and on the butt of the gun, belonging to Neil Entwistle. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil Entwistle visited his parents, Cliff and Yvonne. He told them that he had been driving around and had spent the previous night in a hotel. During this visit, Neil Enwistle revealed to his parents that he had discovered the bodies of his wife and daughter. On January 23, 2006, Neil Enwistle had a 2-hour telephone conversation with Hopkinton police, which was recorded. On January 26, 2006, U.S. law enforcement officials traveled to the UK to interview Neil Enwistle. The next day, after consulting with a lawyer at the U.S. Embassy in London, Neil Enwistle chose not to cooperate with the American detectives. Meanwhile, Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza, sharing a single grave, with around 500 people attending the funeral to pay their respects. However, Neil Enwistle was absent from the ceremony, and Neil Enwistle's name was not mentioned in the proceedings or inscribed on the headstone. Despite this, Neil Enwistle sent a bouquet of flowers, consisting of an orange rose and a white lily, with a note that read, "My orange roses and lilies forever," signed Sakoko. After returning to the UK, Neil Enwistle resumed his normal life in February 2006. However, the media continued to gather outside his parents' home in Worksop. Neil Enwistle went to Notting Hill for dinner with his old crew from York University, followed by a trip to the cinema. Just a week after the funeral, on February 8, 2006, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office issued an arrest warrant for Neil Enwistle. The following day, February 9, 2006, Neil Enwistle was arrested by police at Royal Oak Station as he was about to board a train. Neil Enwistle was returned to the United States on February 15 and appeared in court, where he was denied bail and held at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil Enwistle was formally charged with murder and illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. Neil Enwistle pleaded not guilty despite the charges against him. Almost a year after the incident, in December 2006, authorities at Middlesex County Jail found letters Neil Enwistle had written to his parents and lawyers. These letters showed that Neil Enwistle was depressed and might be thinking about killing himself. As a result, he was moved to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being sent back to Middlesex County. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordes believed that Neil Entwistle's behavior was caused by Asperger's syndrome, a view that was shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, the process of choosing jurors for Neil Entwistle's trial at Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. The trial for the double murder of Neil Entwistle's wife and daughter began on June 2, 2008, in Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led the defense team for Neil Enwistle. During the trial, Elliot attempted to object to the prosecution's plan to introduce DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. Elliot also attempted to suppress other evidence found in the family home, arguing that it was taken without a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil Entwistle chose not to call any witnesses or testify during the trial. Notably, Neil Entwistle showed little emotion throughout the proceedings. On June 25, 2008, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Neil Entwistle of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition. As a result, Neil Entwistle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite the severe sentence, Neil Entwistle appeared calm as he left the courtroom. Neil Entwistle was incarcerated at the Souza Baranowski Correctional Center. In August 2008, he became the victim of a hoax when he shaved his head to seek protection from a white supremacist prison gang. However, instead of receiving protection, the gang threatened Neil Entwistle's life. After this incident, Neil Entwistle was placed in protective custody. He was then transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a prison located in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, in December. The tragic death of Rachel and her infant daughter has left a lasting legacy of grief for the family and those who loved them. In the face of this tragic loss, the community has come together to support and comfort the grieving family. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Mike Williams. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, just north of Tallahassee. His parents worked as a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. To those close to him, he was known as Mike. Despite financial struggles, which led to Mike and his older brother being raised in a trailer, but their childhood was filled with happiness. Furthermore, Mike's parents prioritized their son's education, setting aside money for their future instead of building a new home. Both boys attended North Florida Christian High School, where Mike excelled academically and socially. He served as student council president, played soccer, and actively participated in the Key Club. At 15, Mike developed a passion for duck hunting and met Denise Merrill, a cheerleader and council secretary. They began dating and formed a close bond. Their friends viewed Mike and Denise as a well-suited couple. During high school, Denise introduced Mike to Brian Winchester, and they became inseparable friends. Brian later befriended Kathy Thomas, and the two couples remained lifelong friends. After graduating from high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he studied political science and urban planning. Denise and Mike graduated together, with Denise becoming a public accountant and Mike pursuing a career as a real estate appraiser. Mike was a hardworking individual who consistently put in 15-hour days, which ultimately led to his rapid career advancement. His personal life also flourished, as he married Denise in 1994. Around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The two couples remained close friends. Mike was deeply devoted to his wife and worked tirelessly to provide for their family, exhibiting remarkable enthusiasm and dedication. At 31, Mike Williams was thriving as a real estate appraiser, earning nearly $200,000 annually. He and his wife lived in a small upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and welcomed a daughter, Ensley, in 1999. Despite engaging in risky activities, but he was always cautious and wanted to ensure that his family would be well provided for in the event of an emergency. He turned to his best friend, Brian, an insurance agent, to purchase two insurance policies, one for $250,000 and another for $500,000. After his father's sudden death in 2000, Mike felt a strong need to secure his family's financial future, so he turned to a friend for help again. Brian assisted him in obtaining a life insurance policy with a value of $1 million. 6 months before Mike disappeared, he bought life insurance worth nearly $2 million. On December 16, 2000, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. It was Mike's 6th wedding anniversary, and he planned to celebrate with his wife Denise that night. However, when Denise and their daughter waited for Mike to return home at noon, he failed to show up. Denise became concerned and called her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father went to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but there was no sign of Mike. They searched the areas where Mike liked to hunt but couldn't find him or his boat. They decided to contact the police. Investigators from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency were called in, and a search for Mike began. Later, a helicopter pilot spotted the boat drifting 225 feet from the boat ramp. When the boat was searched, Mike's shotgun was found, still in its case, shows that he has not used it. The search operation shifted from rescue to recovery. Locals believe the area was once an orchard before the three rivers were dammed to create the lake. The lake was nicknamed Stump Field due to the numerous remaining tree stumps above and below the waterline, which posed a hazard to motorized boats. Searchers hypothesized that Mike's boat struck a stump, causing him to fall into the water. His boots, filled with water, may have weighed him down, leading to his possible drowning. Additional agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, joined the search. Despite a thorough search, but no signs of Mike were found. As the days passed, the operation transitioned from rescue to a body recovery mission. Search teams used probe poles to scour the lake's bottom, and service dogs were brought in to assist. 10 days after, a hunting hat with a camouflage pattern was found, but there was no evidence connecting it to Mike. Officials from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency speculated that Mike might have been consumed by alligators, which were abundant in the lake. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement found no evidence of foul play, reinforcing the theory that the incident was accidental. After a 5-week search, the effort to find Mike was halted. The following day, Denise organized a memorial service for her husband. Although Denise seemed to have accepted Mike's departure, his mother still found it difficult to accept. 6 months later, in June 2001, a fisherman discovered a pair of boots floating in the lake. A dive team searched the area and found a hunting jacket and a working flashlight on the lake floor. Inside the jacket pocket was Mike's hunting license, complete with his name and signature. The discovery raised several questions. Notably, neither the jacket nor the boots showed signs of an alligator attack, such as teeth marks. Additionally, none of the items appeared to have been in the water for 6 months, as the boots were not slimy. A week after the discovery, Denise's lawyer petitioned the court to declare Mike dead, citing the found items as evidence. The lawyers suggested that aquatic life, including alligators, might have consumed Mike's body entirely. The court approved this, and a death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. Mike's body was never recovered. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continues to search for her son, although this causes tension in her relationship with Denise. Denise demanded Cheryl stop searching and accept reality, threatening that if she continued, she would never see her granddaughter again. Cheryl refused to give up. She was determined to find Mike. Her perseverance ultimately led to the reopening of the investigation into Mike's disappearance. It took Cheryl 3 years of tireless efforts, including making phone calls, putting up signs, writing to the governor of Florida, compiling evidence, and contacting reporters, to convince law enforcement officials to open an investigation into Mike's disappearance. Cheryl later revealed that her contacted Matthew Oresco, an expert on alligators. Oresco explained that alligators do not eat during the cold winter months due to low water temperatures, and their main priority is maintaining body heat. Temperatures as low as 14 degrees make alligators uninterested in food. Additionally, according to Oresco, alligator attacks always leave behind forensic evidence. 3 years later, Cheryl convinced law enforcement to dismiss the alligator theory and start a formal investigation into her son's disappearance. New discoveries regarding the behavior of alligators prompted a re-examination of the case. Evidence from interviews and data suggested that Mike's death was not an accident. Former investigator Ronnie Austin stated, "My instinct tells me Mike did not die in Lake Seol, and that's what most law enforcement agencies working on this case agree on." Austin worked on Mike's case at the 2nd District State's Attorney's Office. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency initially handled the case as a missing hunter incident. They dedicated 735 hours to searching a 10-acre area of the lake for Mike's body, but surprisingly they did not find any signs of crime. Years later, those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene, expressed that several things seemed unusual from the start. Firstly, it was unusual for Mike to hunt alone. Additionally, his truck was found in an undeveloped area, which would have required him to drag the boat through mud, rather than using the nearby concrete boat launch that he typically used. The severe storm that night should have pushed the boat towards the east shore, but it was instead found on the west shore. Additionally, the boat's motor was not running, yet it was still full of gasoline. If Mike had been operating the boat and fallen out, the boat would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of fuel. Law enforcement initially believed Mike's death was a simple drowning, but they later began to suspect foul play. However, by that time, the crime scene had already been trampled by numerous volunteers and searchers. A vital piece of evidence, a vehicle, was taken by Mike's family without being inspected by investigators. Additionally, some potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise and Brian were identified as suspects when investigators found out that Brian had just gone through a divorce from his previous wife, Kathy, and then quickly married Denise. Furthermore, Denise had received nearly $2 million from Mike's life insurance policy. Detectives also found it suspicious that Brian had sold Mike the policy. The investigation raised more red flags when Denise, Mike's wife, showed no interest in helping with the investigation and tried to prevent Mrs. Cheryl from participating in the search. Denise even prohibited Cheryl from speaking with her granddaughter. When questioned, Brian provided an alibi, claiming he was at home, 60 miles from the lake on the morning of Mike's disappearance. His ex-wife, Kathy, corroborated his story. Brian also mentioned that he had planned to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning but overslept. Denise's interrogation did not reveal any new information. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement concluded that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, which is a criminal offense. However, due to insufficient evidence, they were unable to prosecute. Despite this, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continued to seek answers. The case was featured on the Discovery Cable channel in 2011, but Cheryl became increasingly frustrated with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, feeling that they were either incompetent or uninterested in solving the case. In 2012, she began writing daily letters to Governor Rick Scott, requesting that he either reassign the investigation to another agency or appoint a special prosecutor. Over the course of 9 years, Cheryl sent 2,600 letters to the governor. Meanwhile, Denise and Brian's marriage was deteriorating. In 2012, Denise discovered Brian's infidelity, leading to their breakup. Denise filed for divorce the following year. During the lengthy divorce proceedings, an appraisal of their former home was scheduled in an effort to resolve their property disputes. This brought progress in Mike's case, as tensions between Denise and Brian reached a boiling point. Brian wanted to continue the marriage, but Denise wanted a divorce, because they were constantly arguing, and things were further complicated by the stress of Mike's investigation. Brian started calling Denise repeatedly, but she stopped answering his calls. He became overwhelmed by the stress in their relationship. On August 5, 2016, Denise was set to have her home appraised as part of a court order. That morning, she left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While speaking with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing over the back seat of her car. It was Brian. Brian pressed a loaded gun against Denise's and instructed her to drive straight ahead. Brian said he did this extreme thing because she had quit answering his phone calls. Denise attempted to calm Brian down by agreeing with him and promising to give their marriage another chance. Brian seemed to believe her. Denise assured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the vehicle. As he left, he took several items with him, including a brown sheet, plastic sheeting, a bleach sprayer, and tools. It became clear that Denise had narrowly escaped a potentially fatal situation. She immediately called emergency services, and Brian was quickly arrested. He was charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida that carries a maximum life sentence. He also faced charges of domestic violence and burglary. The court ordered Brian to be held without bail. Cheryl Williams expressed hope that Brian's arrest might lead to a breakthrough in her son's case. Cheryl shared with the New York Daily News, Brian did not want Denise to keep all that money for herself. Cheryl hoped Brian will reveal what really happened. And ultimately, Brian did share what had transpired. Brian managed to negotiate a very favorable deal with the prosecutor, avoiding a life sentence, and then began telling his story. He explained that it all started when he discovered a note in Kathy's purse, revealing that she was cheating on him. This sparked a desire for revenge in Brian. Around that time, Brian and his friends, including Denise and her husband Mike, would often go to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but he had never been attracted to her until Kathy's infidelity. His perspective on Denise changed after being cheated on. In October 1997, Brian and Denise started an affair. Initially, it was just a casual encounter at a rock concert, but it quickly developed into regular and secret dates. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever they had the chance. Brian made it clear that he did not want to divorce Kathy, and Denise was adamant that she would never leave her husband Mike, as she cared deeply about public opinion and did not want to risk losing custody of her daughter. As their relationship progresses, it deepens and they begin to consider themselves a couple, often exchanging gifts and writing romantic letters to each other. They realized they couldn't continue living like this, as they couldn't bear to be apart. However, Denise did not think about getting a divorce because she wanted people to think she was a good and moral person. Around this time, Mike had a near-death experience in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. This gave Denise a ray of hope that they could get out of their current situation. After negotiating the deal with the prosecutor, Brian revealed that in the year 2000, he and Denise started discussing the possibility of Mike and Kathy dying. Denise wanted to make it look like an accident rather than a murder. After considering various options, Brian and Denise planned to fake a boating accident. This would allow them to collect the maximum amount from Mike's life insurance policy before it expired at the end of December 2000. They devised a plan, and Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip to a spot on Lake Simal's shores, telling him to bring his wading boots. The boots were crucial, as it was believed that wearing them would lead to rapid drowning if Mike fell overboard. However, when Brian pushed Mike into the water, the plan didn't unfold as expected. Instead of sinking, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and began wading towards the shore. Brian was in a state of panic. He didn't know how to handle the situation. Mike was loudly calling for help, and Brian felt overwhelmed. In his panic, Brian grabbed his shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking. The plan had gone terribly wrong, and now Brian had to cover up the incident. Time was running out because he had to go home and prepare for a hunting trip with his father-in-law. Since no one knew Brian was at the lake with Mike, he decided to return home and pretend he had overslept. He drove back, hoping to find his wife, Kathy, still asleep. Brian entered the house quietly, finding Kathy asleep and his phone on the floor. He went to bed, called his father-in-law to apologize, and began creating an alibi for himself. Meanwhile, he hid Mike's body. Denise didn't know what really happened when Mike went missing. Brian attempted to confess to her, but she refused to listen. She preferred to believe that Mike's disappearance was an act of God, allowing her to move on with her life. According to Brian, he and Denise made a promise to each other to keep the truth hidden forever. Denise and Brian claimed that Mike's death was necessary because they couldn't live together. They stated that the life insurance payout was just an added benefit. Brian would later testify in court. However, investigators discovered that Brian had planted evidence, including a hat, boots, flashlight, and license, to mislead searchers and create false evidence to declare Mike dead, allowing Denise to collect the insurance. Denise received around $2 million, including Social Security and other benefits. On May 8, 2018, Denise was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and accessory to a felony, carrying a life sentence. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. 5 months later, her daughter Ansley received Mike's assets and insurance payout. Denise appealed the conviction and life sentence in January 2020. Her attorney arguing before the Florida First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence of her direct involvement in the murder. In November 2020, Denise's murder conviction was overturned. However, her 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld, and she is currently serving her sentence at the Florida Women's Reception Center. Denise is expected to be released when she is 78 years old. Brian was transferred to the Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve the remainder of his sentence. He is scheduled to be released on July 30, 2036, when he will be 67 years old. Ansley, Mike and Denise's daughter, maintains her mother's innocence and blames Brian. Ansley has refused to speak to the media about the case and personal life. According to Cheryl and Nick, Ansley's uncle, they have been unable to reconnect with Ansley. Cheryl expressed her sorrow, stating that she has not only lost her son but also her connection with her granddaughter. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Mary Katherine Hickden. Mary Katherine Hickden, born in 1994, was a lively child known for her sense of humor and ability to make others laugh with her witty remarks and impersonations. She enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature, often taking walks around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring. This early exposure to the natural world instilled in her a deep love and respect for the environment and animals. Mary was also a talented and creative performer. She regularly performed for her family in homemade plays, showing off her vivid imagination and ability to attract attention on stage. Her family recognized her natural talent and envisioned a bright future for her. As she grew older, Mary developed another passion, that was firearms. Under proper guidance, she learned to handle guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Through dedication and practice, Mary became a skilled marksman during her high school years. Mary Katherine met the love of her life, Stephen Freeman, who was born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia. He was raised in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. As a child, Stephen was known to be happy and friendly, with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Those who knew him said he genuinely cared for everyone around him. Stephen had a deep appreciation for nature and enjoyed spending time outdoors. Their love for nature led them to enjoy activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting together. This shared interest laid the groundwork for their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, they started a new chapter in their lives. As high school sweethearts, they decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving into a house together in Griffin, Georgia. Living in their own space excited Mary Katherine and Stephen. Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Katherine as more than just her son's partner. She genuinely considered her a daughter and accepted her into their family. Mary Katherine and Stephen visited Stephen's parents every Sunday for a big family dinner, a tradition that strengthened their bond and cemented Mary Katherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends initially had reservations about his relationship with Mary Katherine. However, as they spent more time together, they grew to appreciate how well-suited Mary Katherine and Stephen was. Mary Katherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life, and her love for Stephen was admirable. Stephen worked as a metal worker and repaired roofs, while Mary Katherine was a part-time teacher's assistant at a preschool in Milner, Georgia. She also worked at a sporting goods store, where she sold guns and learned about basic gun safety, including how to hold, load, and shoot a gun. This experience was shared with Stephen, who owned several firearms, including shotguns and rifles, which he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 at home for protection. By the summer of 2018, Mary Katherine and Stephen had been in a relationship for 5 years and were still living together in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia. However, their happiness was shattered on the night of August 1st when Mary Katherine made a frantic 911 call. When the dispatcher answered, Mary Katherine cried out that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. The police quickly arrived at the apartment and found Mary Katherine in a state of distress. Mary Katherine, hysterical and overcome with grief, cried and hyperventilated as she knelt beside Stephen's lifeless body, repeatedly screaming, "I cannot lose him." Her voice was filled with anguish and despair. As the police gently moved Mary Katherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They found that he had been shot in the chest but was still alive. An ambulance was called to rush Stephen to the hospital, where doctors worked to save his life. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Stephen's condition continued to worsen, and he eventually passed away due to the severity of his injuries. Mary Katherine accompanied the police to the police department for a formal interview after Stephen was taken to the hospital. She began by recounting the events of the night that led to her accidentally shooting Stephen. According to Mary Katherine, she was handing Stephen the gun because he usually kept it on the side of his bed at night for safety. However, she stated that they never kept a bullet in the magazine of the guns. During the interview, the police noticed the smell of alcohol on Mary Katherine's breath. As the questioning continued, Mary Katherine's story about the shooting changed. Initially, she said she handed the gun to Stephen, but later claimed she tossed it to him instead. The police were skeptical about her story, knowing that the gun would not fire randomly when thrown, and someone must have pulled the trigger. Furthermore, the location of Stephen's gunshot wound led the police to believe that Mary Katherine must have been pointing the gun directly at him for the bullet to strike where it did. At one point during the interview, Mary Katherine said she shot Stephen out of anger. However, due to technical issues, only feedback was recorded during this part of the conversation, despite the police recording the entire interview. The police believed they had sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Katherine deliberately shot her boyfriend Stephen, even without a crucial part of the recording. At their apartment, investigators found signs of a heated argument before the shooting. The presence of scattered food throughout the house indicated that an altercation had taken place. Additionally, it was found that police officers had visited the house of Mary and Stephen 5 times in the past year due to domestic disputes. The police also discovered evidence that the gun used to shoot Stephen was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Katherine's claims. Furthermore, cooking grease was also found on both the gun and the magazine. This discovery led the police to conclude that Mary Katherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the gun. After Mary Katherine shot Stephen, the police interviewed his friends to gather information about their relationship. According to Stephen's friends, the relationship between Mary Katherine and Stephen was toxic and marked by constant arguing. They reported that Mary Katherine and Stephen frequently had heated confrontations. Stephen's friends reported that Mary Katherine was extremely possessive and verbally abusive towards him. They claimed she showed signs of mental instability, which made their relationship increasingly tense. Whenever Stephen tried to take some space and leave their apartment, Mary Katherine would bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Katherine pulling a gun on him at least 3 times in the past. Stephen didn't report incidents to the police because he worried Mary Katherine would get in trouble. His primary concern was her well-being, even when his own safety was at risk. When his friends found out that Mary Katherine accidentally shot Stephen, they struggled to believe it since she knew how to handle a firearm. 3 months before the shooting, Stephen told a friend that Mary Katherine was behaving erratically, screaming outside, and trying to shoot both him and herself. A month later, Stephen confided in another friend that Mary Katherine had pointed a gun at him before, but the most recent incident made him genuinely fear she would follow through. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Katherine's behavior and considered leaving her after 7 years together. He planned to secretly move to a new town while she was out due to fearing her reaction if she knew. Police later discovered text messages from July 30, 2018, 2 days before Mary Katherine fatally shot Stephen. The first text message sent by Stephen to Mary Katherine on July 30 read, "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Katherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen then replied, "You too. Love you." However, the police found that the following night, July 31st, Stephen spent the evening at a friend's house and did not return Mary Katherine's texts or calls because they was fighting. On the night of the shooting, August 1st, Mary Katherine was at home preparing dinner, but Stephen was not there. She reached out to Stephen's mother. She informed her that Stephen was with his friend. Angry at Stephen, Mary Katherine started driving to his friend's house. As she drove, she spotted Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Katherine pulled alongside Stephen's friend and started yelling at Stephen. Stephen tried to calm Mary Katherine down, assuring her that he was on his way home. Mary Katherine allegedly pointed a gun at Stephen multiple times, according to his friends. However, Mary strongly denied these claims, stating she never pulled a gun on him. On another hand, Mary Katherine did admit to threatening to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. Stephen's mother believed that he stayed with Mary Katherine due to her repeated threats of self-harm, which made Stephen fear for Mary's life if he left. On the night of the incident, Mary Katherine claimed that Stephen became violent, throwing the dinner she prepared in her face. She stated that she picked up the gun for self-defense, trying to scare Stephen away and make him leave the apartment. According to her, Stephen lunged at her, causing her to back away, and the next thing she knew, he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of Stephen's shooting, Mary Katherine did not tell the police about Stephen's history of violence towards her because she was embarrassed. According to Mary Katherine, Stephen had been violent and controlling in the past, even kicking her out of bed with enough force to make her hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on the relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Katherine hitting Stephen, including one instance where she slapped him hard in the face. On the other hand, Mary Katherine's sister had a different view of their relationship. She reported seeing bruises on Mary Katherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was shot. When she asked Mary Katherine about the bruises, Mary Katherine said that Stephen had grabbed her. After investigating Stephen's death, the police concluded that it was a murder. As a result, Mary Katherine was charged with murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The state offered Mary Katherine a plea deal and receive a life sentence with the possibility of parole. However, she rejected the offer and chose to went to trial, pleading not guilty and arguing that she shot Stephen in self-defense. The trial began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death. Mary Katherine's attorneys claimed that she acted in self-defense, citing her genuine fear of Stephen due to his violent and abusive history. They presented evidence of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and violent behavior to support their case. During the trial, Mary Katherine testified in her own defense, sharing emotional accounts of the constant abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen. She described a pervasive pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse, stating that Stephen would frequently hit her, humiliate her, and subject her. Mary Katherine reported that Stephen subjected her to various forms of abuse. She shared instances where he physically and verbally abused her. The abuse had a profound impact on her physical and emotional well-being, leaving her feeling trapped and fearful for her life. During the trial, Mary Katherine's defense presented a text message from Stephen, stating that she would be punished when he returned home. When questioned about the meaning of this message, Mary Katherine explained that Stephen would physically abuse her and demand that she be a better girlfriend. The defense also presented another text message, in which Stephen warned Mary Katherine not to hit him, threatening to retaliate with twice the force. In her testimony, Mary Katherine described a red room where Stephen and Mary Katherine engaged in aggressive and sometimes violent intimacy, likening it to a concept from the popular book series 50 Shades of Grey. Mary's defense attorneys presented a text message from Stephen, which stated, "I miss you too much, I'm coming home, and you're about to get it bad, you're going to the red room." Mary Katherine also testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, one of which occurred after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World. Mary Katherine reported that their intercourse had become increasingly aggressive, and she expressed her discomfort to Stephen, asking him to stop. However, instead of heeding her pleas, Stephen allegedly intensified his efforts. He claimed that she had received various gifts at Disney World and now owed him what was rightfully his. According to Mary Katherine, Stephen told her that she had to give him what he wanted and what he deserved. The defense presented additional evidence in the form of text messages from Stephen to support Mary Katherine's claims of abuse. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and demonstrated a pattern of verbal assaults directed towards Mary Katherine. The defense had over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen that showcased his abusive behavior. One particular image sent while Stephen was out with a group of friends was particularly disturbing. In the image, Stephen was holding a large dead fish aloft with the caption, "This is you." Another message from Stephen to Mary Katherine, after she cheated on him, read that he would wreck her for her wrecking him. The defense also alleged that Stephen struggled with addiction to drugs and alcohol, which led to violent outbursts. During the conversation about the night Mary Katherine shot Stephen, she claimed that she ended their relationship, not Stephen. According to Mary Katherine, Stephen did not take the breakup and acted like he was going to attack her. Fearing for her safety, she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Mary Katherine stated that the last words she exchanged with Stephen before shooting him were, "Get out of my house." However, Stephen's friends and family disagreed with Mary Katherine's portrayal of him as violent, abusive, and dangerous. They described him as laid-back, friendly, and caring. His mother stated she was unaware of Stephen sending Mary Katherine disturbing text messages or threatening violence. While she did not condone such behavior, she believed Stephen only acted out of anger. During cross-examination, the state questioned Mary Katherine about never reporting the alleged abuse by Stephen. The state also pointed out that hours before the shooting, Mary Katherine had been searching for violent and sexually explicit images online while babysitting. Mary Katherine claimed she was looking at those sites to get ideas to make Stephen happy and convince him to stay with her. The state noted that Mary Katherine had altered her story about the night of the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview a year prior to the trial. A crucial piece of evidence presented in court to support the prosecution's theory that Mary Katherine intentionally shot Stephen was a text message he sent her. The message stated that she had pointed a gun at him multiple times before, and the last incident had scared him. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified in court, sharing their accounts of witnessing Mary Katherine's abuse towards him. Their testimonies corroborated the prosecution's argument that Mary Katherine had a history of violence against Stephen, contradicting her claims that he was the abuser. After deliberating for 4 hours, the jury delivered a verdict of not guilty on the charges of malice murder, felony murder, assault, and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. As a result, Mary Katherine was released from prison. The verdict shocked Stephen's loved ones, who were stunned by the decision. In a later admission, members of the jury revealed that they believed Mary Katherine had intentionally shot and killed Stephen. However, they acknowledged that there was insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt why she had shot him. This lack of evidence made it challenging to determine whether the shooting was murder or justified as self-defense. The jury was also unable to reach a consensus on the validity of all the accusations against both Stephen and Mary Katherine. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Lamar. In March 2012, the Lamar family, consisting of Steve, a computer expert, his wife Marlene, and their two daughters, Danielle and Sierra, living in Fremont, California. Sierra was younger sister. She was born on October 19, 1996. Both girls had a relatively comfortable upbringing, with the usual ups and downs that come with family life. However, a disturbing fact about their father's past had a profound impact on the family. When Danielle and Sierra were younger, their father, Steve, was involved in a serious incident involving inappropriate behavior with one of their roommates during a sleepover. As a result, Steve was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Despite Steve's past convictions, both Sierra and Danielle reported having a good relationship with him, describing him as a kind and respected father. However, when Marlene learned about the incident, they decided to end their relationship, which was already struggling. Marlene soon moved on and started a new relationship. Despite this, both Sierra and Danielle attended Washington High School in their community, where they enjoyed socializing and performed reasonably well academically. Sierra was a cheerful and lively girl who was well-liked at school. She enjoyed participating in dance competitions and cheerleading. In October 2011, her mother, Marlene, decided to move from Fremont to Morgan Hill, a town located 40 miles southwest. Sierra, her mother, and her mother's boyfriend, Rick Gardner, settled into a rented ranch-style home on a rural cul-de-sac. However, Sierra was initially unhappy about leaving behind her close friends and hobbies in Fremont. She struggled to adjust to her new school, Sobrato High, where she didn't receive the same warm welcome she had at Washington High. Despite this, Sierra eventually settled in and made new friends, earning the respect and even joining the cheerleading squad again. By March 2012, Sierra had adapted well to her new environment. On March 11th, she had a conversation with her father and her sister, who still lived in Fremont, and updated them on her progress. The conversation was mostly positive, with Sierra expressing excitement about an upcoming school project, wanting to get her hair colored, and discussing her homework with her sister. Her academic performance seemed to be going well. Sierra ended her Thursday evening chat with Danielle and Steve after dinner, as she had school the next day and it was getting late. They agreed to part ways and promised to catch up soon, unaware that this would be their last conversation. The next morning, February 16, 2012, Sierra got ready for school, locking the house behind her. At 6:29 a.m., she tweeted a friend, then put on her shoes and left to catch the bus. The bus stop was located on a desolate road between Palm and Dewey Avenues, far from Sierra's school, Sobrato High. Many students, including Sierra, had to cross this road daily to catch the bus. At 7:11 a.m., Sierra texted a friend to meet up before class. However, when the bus arrived at 7:11 and 15 seconds a.m., Sierra was missing. Sierra didn't show up to school, which her friends found unusual. However, they didn't think it was serious enough to report to the school authorities. The day went on as usual. When the school day ended, Marlene, Sierra's mom, tried to contact Sierra, but her call went straight to voicemail. Although Marlene thought this was strange, she didn't get worried. However, when she got home and saw that Sierra's room was still empty, she realized that something was amiss. She contacted Steve to ask if Sierra was planning to visit him in Fremont again. Unfortunately, the answer was no. When Marlene called Danielle and a few other friends, they all left with the same message that Sierra could not be found. Marlene began to panic when she called Sierra's high school and discovered that she had missed all her classes. After her calling the authorities, officers were immediately sent to the pedo-Hispanic court. They began by speaking with those closest to Sierra, including several of her friends, who were all candid about the difficulties Sierra and her family were facing. Although Sierra was generally content, it had only been a few months since her mother's divorce forced her to leave her family and old friends behind. Authorities initially thought that Sierra might have left voluntarily, as she had previously mentioned returning to Fremont in a light-hearted and sometimes serious manner. However, there were several things that contradicted this theory. Sierra had stopped posting on social media, her phone was turned off, and all calls went straight to voicemail. She also never arrived at the front door of her home. Her loved ones launched a massive search despite police downplaying her disappearance. The investigation into Sierra's disappearance led to a complex trail of evidence. 2 days after she vanished, data forensics began examining her phone's previous activity. They discovered that her phone had briefly turned on in the middle of the night, before turning off again. The phone's coordinates pointed to a field near Sierra's house, which became a crucial lead in the investigation. A search crew thoroughly searched the fields where Sierra's phone had last been detected. Within minutes, they found the Samsung Galaxy phone she had been using. It was near the road, damaged, and had likely been thrown from a vehicle. Investigators concluded that Sierra hadn't turned on her phone that evening. Instead, they believed that rain had caused a false signal, briefly activating her phone. This coincidence was crucial, as the entire investigation hinged on the discovery of her phone. The case took a disturbing turn when detectives realized that Sierra's phone was probably thrown from a moving vehicle. There were no footprints, tire tracks, or other visible evidence. The next day, a search crew made another discovery. Sierra's backpack was found 2 kilometers from her house, discarded outside a barn. The bag contained her schoolwork, inhaler, and money, suggesting that she had been on her way to school and was forcibly separated from her essential items. Additionally, a complete outfit, believed to be the one Sierra was wearing the morning she vanished, was found in her luggage. This outfit included her pullover, pants, socks, shoes, and even undergarments. The outfit was subjected to DNA testing, which yielded results. Specifically, her pants contained male foreign DNA, suggesting that she had likely been assaulted. The discovery of Sierra's phone and clothing led to a surge of local and international sympathy. The search effort, which had already intensified significantly in the days following her disappearance, received a fresh wave of support. Authorities received over 1,000 new tips, and officers worked more than 7,000 hours. Multiple search teams, comprising over 800 individuals, were deployed to thoroughly search the area. They systematically examined every available lake and reservoir, combed over fields, and searched abandoned buildings. Sierra's disappearance was a major topic of discussion in the community, with missing person posters put up everywhere. Her parents offered a $10,000 reward for any credible information leading to her safe return. Despite the efforts of the community and investigators, only a golf ball and a flipper were found. However, unbeknownst to the public, investigators were making progress in identifying a potential suspect. 12 days after Sierra's disappearance, on March 28, DNA analysis revealed that the DNA on her pants belonged to a local man. As part of the investigation, DNA samples from all 57 registered sex offenders in the Morgan Hill zip code were compared to the DNA evidence. Sierra's father, who had a criminal record, proactively contacted law enforcement and was quickly eliminated as a suspect. One of the local men who had not been ruled out as a suspect was Antolin Garcia Torres. Following a DNA match between the 21-year-old man and Sierra's pants, he came to public attention. At the time, he lived in Maple Leaf Recreational Vehicle Park with his mother, pregnant wife, and daughter, about 7 miles from Sierra's house. Antolin Garcia Torres had a troubling past, had a challenging upbringing marked by abuse and neglect. His father, who was abusive and often drunk, had threatened to kill him and his mother before being imprisoned for molesting a young family member. The father's abusive behavior appears to have been passed on to his son. Although 2009 allegations of having sex with a minor were dismissed, Antolin Garcia Torres's DNA was collected. He was also detained in 2010 for impeding police operations. Due to the suspicious relationship between he and Sierra, detectives put him under constant surveillance. As it was unclear whether Sierra was still alive, Antolin Garcia Torres was the most likely person to have information. To monitor his activities, police tapped his phone, placed a GPS tracker in his car, and had 2 undercover investigators move into a vehicle park next to his house. After discovering that the vehicle park had cameras at the front door, investigators began reviewing security footage from the neighborhood around Antolin Garcia Torres's residence. They examined the film taken on the day of Sierra's disappearance to determine whether Antolin had left or arrived home. It was discovered that Antolin had left the campground in his red Volkswagen Jetta at 7 a.m. on the morning she vanished. Given that his home was only 7 miles from Sierra, Antolin's travel time matched the period during which Sierra could have been kidnapped. Although Antolin had left for work at the usual time, Safeway's shift records showed that he did not arrive at work on Sierra went missing. It was found that 3 years prior, there were 3 unsuccessful kidnapping attempts in the Safeway parking lot. But none of the perpetrators were identified or detained. The only evidence from these attempts was a taser dropped by the perpetrator, which had a fingerprint on one of its batteries. However, it was only a partial fingerprint, requiring a direct one-to-one comparison to match. The idea seemed promising, but when Antolin's fingerprints were compared to those on the taser, a surprising revelation emerged. In reality, their suspect was indeed Antolin. Antolin was taken into custody by investigators after being positively identified as someone who was present when Sierra went missing. His DNA was found on her pants, and he had a history of involvement in kidnappings. This evidence was enough to detain him for questioning and to seize his vehicle for further DNA testing. During the interview, the suspect, Antolin, showed arrogance and was dismissive of the questions. He claimed that on the day Sierra vanished, he had gone fishing and didn't know who she was. He was confident that the investigators wouldn't find any evidence against him. However, before the interview ended, Antolin made a strange revelation. He admitted to having a habit of strangling a snake while driving and then throwing the tissue out the window. He also claimed to have thrown out a used tissue in the exact spot where Sierra's bag was found on the morning she went missing. We already had a 1 in a million chance with the rain on Sierra's phone, and the police didn't believe Antolin's implausible explanation either. On May 21, 2012, Antolin Garcia Torres was formally detained in connection with Sierra Lamar's disappearance outside his workplace in a Safeway parking lot. This was the result of several distinct links between Sierra and Antolin's vehicle. A DNA test found her DNA on the interior door handle of the car's rear door. Additionally, fibers from the car seats matched those found on Sierra's clothing, and a piece of rope inside the car contained a strand of her hair. This proved beyond a doubt that she had been in his car at some point. However, even after his arrest, there was a significant issue. Despite the apparent evidence, Sierra's body had yet to be found. Could they accuse Antolin of first-degree murder without a body or verified death? In reality, Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeff Rosen announced on May 19, 2014, that he would seek the death penalty against Antolin. Although Antolin had previously pleaded not guilty to killing Sierra, the overwhelming evidence pointed to his guilt. Antolin's trial began on January 30, 2017, after being delayed. The trial was prolonged and stressful for all parties involved, with the prosecution and defense presenting lengthy arguments over 13 weeks of testimony. Antoline's defense team argued that his exposure to pesticides from surrounding fields during his childhood may have impaired his cognitive abilities. They claimed that this exposure was not his fault and, as a result, he should not be eligible for the death penalty. The defense argued that Antoline faced a unique disadvantage due to circumstances beyond his control. In a final attempt, Antoline's defense team requested a new trial, questioning the chief investigator's reliability and honesty, and alleging that he had tampered with evidence in the past. However, this attempt was denied. The jury convicted Antoline Garcia Torres of Sierra Lamar's first-degree murder on May 9, 2017. The evidence was so overwhelming against Antoline that he was unable to escape responsibility for his acts, even though Sierra's body has never been located. Outside of the evidence offered, Antoline was formally given a life sentence without the chance of parole after being spared the death penalty. Since his sentencing, Antoline has stayed largely silent, and despite receiving hundreds of letters from news organizations and total strangers, only one letter has been answered. Antoline wrote, "I hold fast to my innocence, and I'm not going to talk about the matter." It's puzzling why Annalyn continues to claim innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him. The presence of his DNA on Sierra's belongings, her DNA in his car, his past crimes, and a detailed timeline all clearly indicate his involvement in Sierra's disappearance. The search for Sierra Lamar is believed by some organizers to be the longest continuous search for a missing person in U.S. history. It spanned 3 years, with over 1,100 searches conducted within a 15-mile radius, totaling 50,000 man-hours of effort. Volunteers braved extreme weather conditions, from scorching summers to cold winters, in their quest for any information about Sierra. Despite the passing of time, many volunteers continue to search for her, driven by the desire to bring closure to her family, even though they acknowledge the likelihood of her being deceased. Currently, the whereabouts of Sierra's body remain unknown, but the hope is that one day, the Lamar family will find the closure they seek.